Students from all directions flocked to the entrance of the large building that was the Junior Spiritual Guardian Academy. Soon, the instructor was reminding the graduates that the Pet Tamer Guardian entrance exams were less than a week away. The teacher advised to spend the next couple days preparing to be able to get into the perfect college. The graduates were vigorously discussing how quickly their entire 3 years of education had flown by. Some students were worried that they wouldn't even be able to enter a regular academy and would have to live as an ordinary person. Only one guy sat silently and tried to understand how the Spirit Guard exam and his transition were related. The young man's new life began a week ago, when his soul moved into the brunette's body. Taking in his new body, he slowly came to his senses, and his thoughts were filled with other people's memories. It was because of this fact that the transient was well aware of the world he found himself in when he opened his eyes. In this universe, monsters ran rampant and humans could only survive thanks to high city walls. To fight the monsters, humans evolved and learned to control spiritual beings. This is how the profession of Spirit Guardian came into being. These people were capable of fighting monsters in the wilderness. With the taming of the spirit beast, one could guard the human city as well as discover places outside of it. For young people in this world, the biggest dream is to become a powerful spiritual guardian. Upon coming of age, every inhabitant of this planet is given a monster egg to sign a contract with. However, the original owner of this body had already hatched his own monster, which was not a good fit for a spirit guardian. Inside was an ugly, horrible, stiff and tough monster that couldn't even walk, moving by leaps and bounds. The zombie pet had outstanding defense, but its attack was useless and it couldn't evolve, so the original body master died of despair. This fact was frustrating for the transient, because others like him had cheats or incredible strength. The guy sighed sadly in his seat just as Yeling's friend approached him. Chenji wanted to comfort the young man, reminding him that if he failed the exam, he could always become an ordinary office worker. Nu Lin informed the redhead that he didn't need the comfort of someone who possessed a high-performance wind wolf. The guy wanted to complain about his zombie's failure just as the spiritual guard system activated. The brunette looked at the screen in front of him in confusion and heard that the spirit pet would be able to improve. This moment was a turning point in the life of the transitioner as his assistant finally appeared in front of him. Yeling excitedly watched the small window in front of his eyes, which reported that the system had been successfully activated. The transient was so overjoyed by this news that he did not immediately notice that his name was called. It was only when Chenzi shook him worriedly that the brunette remembered to act normal and not give away the presence of the system. The redhead easily let the situation go and advised his friend to try his best to get into some low-level academy. However, the issue of Yelling's future was not a problem for him now, and the guy asked G not to worry about it. After all, having a spiritual guard system at his disposal, a transient wasn't going to join a mere academy. The brunette reported this to his friend, and it elicited laughter and jeers from the class's chief bully. Liu Wu didn't miss the chance to remind Yeling that he had gotten a worthless zombie, and it was pathetic to think of entering a normal academy with him. Chen was angry about this and ordered the bully not to use his family status to bully. Transitioning, however, remained calm, and did not allow Z to clash with a member of an influential family. Yeling smugly smiled and promised his friend that they would teach Liu Wu a lesson after they were accepted into the top spiritual academy. The boys scrambled towards the exit to the taunts of their classmates, but only Chen Zi managed to get hurt. The friends had left the Junior Spirit Guardian Academy, which meant they could spend the rest of the day however they wanted. The redhead was going to go to the gym, and Yeling was going to go home and explore his new abilities properly. Transitioner realized he didn't have much time to spare, so he preferred not to waste time. As soon as Yeling reached his house, he made his way to the living room and started calling for his system. After that, an information window appeared in front of him, and the system told him that it would help him understand his pet, and also help in improving it. The boy was ready to start exploring, happy to have gotten a head start on his new life after all. On the screen, all the information about Yelling's level and skills were available, and it was written that he had no points to improve. In addition, the brunette could see how much spiritual energy he needed for skills, and all the information about the black-eyed zombie. His pet had nothing special, but at the end of the questionnaire was a list of evolutionary directions. In this world, pets had 8 stages of evolution, but in the entire Federation, there was no spirit with the highest level. A low-level pet could be upgraded to a maximum of the 4th rank of level 10, while a medium-level pet could already only have a 5th rank. Only epic pets could improve to rank 9 and 10, and this gave the spirit more skills and talents. Yeling looked at his zombie and realized that if his pet evolved, no one would call them trash anymore. Transitioner laughed merrily and leaned back on the back of the couch, happy that with these opportunities, any academy was in his pocket. Suddenly, the young man remembered that evolution required materials and hurried to see exactly what was required of him. However, the spirit guarding system reported that a pet could be elevated for free the first time. The guy looked at the black-eyed zombie and decided to improve the spirit since they already had a contract. In anticipation, the transient pressed the button that appeared to improve, and the evolutionary process began. The little black-eyed zombie flew into the air and was enveloped by black and blue rays. As they disappeared, Yeling could see new areas of his spirit pet's skin. Eventually, the rays dissipated completely, and a pretty girl with long white hair appeared before the brunette. The difference between the black-eyed zombie and his new pet was stupendous, and the transient hesitated to do anything right. Finally, the evolution was fully complete, and the girl began to descend to the ground. When the zombie was in front of her master, her red eyes opened, and she asked her master to take care of her. Yeling remained on the sofa and scrutinized the girl who was an inferior spirit just a few seconds ago. The guy was overflowing with positive emotions, and he couldn't wait to find out what his pet could do now. Besides, the brunette couldn't help but notice that the zombie girl was surprisingly beautiful. He hurried over to the spiritual guard system to see how much its performance had improved. Yeling now possessed a white-eyed zombie that could lower physical damage and possessed a bloodlust skill. Transitioner was thrilled that he was able to improve his pet's growth strength, so he also gained a skill. The brunette opened up information on it and learned that when fighting an enemy, it could recover from its own wounds, greatly increasing its attack power if it dealt damage to the enemy. Yeling noticed that the skill had a cooldown time, but still thought that bloodlust, combined with the talent, opened up a lot of possibilities for them. The guy then asked the system what they needed to get skill and talent points. That's how the guy found out he had 2 free points that he could use to improve both the pet's skills and his own. To master spiritual skills, a spiritual messenger needs training. In the present schools, only 3 spiritual skills are taught, namely the spiritual chain, spiritual shield, and spiritual vision. The spiritual skills possessed by a spiritual messenger are very difficult to improve, and improving one's own skills wouldn't be the best use of Yelling's resources. Therefore, he decided to choose talents for the white-eyed zombie. As a result, he was offered a magic damage reduction and instant regeneration. The third skill dropped off was the berserk skill, which allowed the girl to consume her own health to increase strength and speed. Transitioner thought that all 3 skills were quite strong, but he needed to choose 2 talents. Guided by the fact that zombies should behave like zombies, Yelin had added instant regeneration in the first place. A green glow appeared around the pet, and she gained the ability to continue regenerating until she died. Spirit pets could be mortally wounded during battle, so the brunette was glad that his spirit wasn't in danger of that. Then the choice fell on the berserker, as this skill combined perfectly with bloodlust, and zombies stayed safe due to regeneration. After that, the girl's body was enveloped in red-black energy, and her fangs lengthened, revealing themselves in a predatory smile. The berserk skill opened up the white-eyed zombie's ability to not only be a shield, but also to attack enemies. The brunette had created a truly terrifying zombie girl and was happy to realize that this was far from over. The guy spent all his glasses and walked over to the pet to assess her new look. The young man rubbed the zombie's cheek and felt that her skin was soft and no different from normal. A slight blush appeared on the zombie girl's face and she inquired as to what her master was doing. Yeling felt awkward and instantly pulled away, admitting that he hadn't expected to hear a zombie's voice. The brunette realized he shouldn't just call his pet a zombie, so he offered to give her a name. After thinking for a bit, the young man suggested the girl's name, Shui, and the white-eyed girl nodded in agreement. The guy went back to the system and wrote the zombie girl's new name in the name column and reviewed the changed data. Yeling saw that the talents and skills he had acquired were also already displayed on the form. The young man was happy that his pet had gotten stronger and was now ready to hunt other monsters. Transitioner closed the spiritual guard system window and informed Shui that it was time for them to go hunting. The Federation he was in was not technologically weak, but all transportation in it ran on spiritual energy. It was only possible to travel in cars inside the city, because outside the city monsters were raging and leaving was equal to suicide. The closest means of transportation around the city were cars, but if one needed to go to another city, the safest transportation was an airship. The Federation found a powerful Imperial Spirit Ambassador to escort the airship to ensure safe flights. Yeling caught a cab and paid with a credit score in advance, which was not new to him because he had the same currency in his previous life. The brunette then turned to the driver and asked for a ride closer to the south gate. The man realized that the student in front of him was a student of Tianhui School, but he still doubted that the young man should go there alone. However, Yeling calmed down the driver and said that he was going there to hunt monsters. There were 4 entrances in the entire Tianhui city: east, west, north, and south. Each gate was guarded by heavily armed soldiers who fought back against the monsters, and it was really dangerous at the south gate, but that was only to Yelling's advantage, so he boldly went there. The brunette was no longer useless in battle, and was ready to go outside the city and raise Shui's level. The young man was stopped by guards at the gate. He was then asked to provide identification. The young man pulled out a small card that gave him permission to leave the city and held it out to the guards. The guards scrutinized the document and stepped aside, allowing Yeling to leave the safe area. There were a few relatively low-level monsters throughout the city, and the high-level ones usually drove pretty far away. Even so, Yeling realized that in the wilderness one shouldn't relax even when one had just stepped outside of the city. That was why he immediately summoned Shui, and the zombie girl instantly appeared beside her master. The map showed that there was a grave mound nearby that was inhabited by low-level skeleton monsters. Transitioner remembered that they were great for leveling up and could also provide evolutionary material, so they headed to the location. The pair moved leisurely through the forest, and Yeling pondered the fact that for the next evolution, he needed to gather resources himself. At the moment, Shui was a white-eyed zombie and had an ordinary status, but she also had the ability to evolve. The next stage of development was a rare gray-eyed zombie, but that required some resources, namely flawless bones, heart of darkness, 10 small crystals of darkness, and 10 essences of bloody darkness. And luckily at the burial ground they were heading to, there was an opportunity to get 2 kinds of resources. Flawless bones fell off the skeleton-shaped monsters quite often, but it was also possible to find a crystal of darkness. Suddenly, Shuei broke the silence of the grave mound, drawing her master's attention. The brunette turned to the zombie and wondered what was wrong, for they had just reached their destination. The girl looked around and informed her host that they were surrounded by undead and would soon be attacked. Yeling explained to Shuei that they had come to this place to hunt monsters, so it was fine. However, the guy himself didn't see anything suspicious around them, though the map showed the presence of skeleton soldiers. Suddenly, something grabbed the brunette's leg and made the young man stop and look down. At this moment, the bones in the clearing came into action and turned into living skeletons, attacking Yeling. Before the monsters could harm him, the young man managed to call out to Shui, ordering the girl to destroy the skeletons. At that moment, the system's information window appeared nearby, notifying her of a new assignment. It consisted of a zombie killing 20 skeleton soldiers, and being rewarded with 50% experience. The brunette got excited over such a generous reward and shouted orders to his pet to kill the enemies. Thanks to the berserk skill, long claws appeared on Shuei's hands, which she used to destroy skeletons with ease. Enemies were blown apart in seconds, and the boy watched his familiar with delight. With just one strike, the white-eyed woman defeated 4 skeletons, and it reminded Yeling that he had a very strong spirit. Another group of skeleton soldiers ran towards them, but this time the young man felt no fear at all. He knew that his spirit pet would easily defeat the enemies, so he ordered her to destroy all of them. The eyes of the enemies were glowing red, and some of them had weapons in their hands, and the monsters were ready to fight. However, they all stopped mesmerized and stared upwards as Shuei soared into the air, preparing to strike. On the girl's fingernails was a corpse poison that would penetrate the enemy's body at the slightest scratch. Although skeletons were immune to this effect, the zombie had no trouble destroying 2nd or 3rd level first-stage opponents. In a matter of seconds, the white-eyed woman had destroyed 6 skeletons, and Yeling happily exclaimed that they would complete the task too quickly. They moved forward on the grave mound and brought more and more low-level enemies to their senses. The brunette tensed slightly and stepped back, letting his familiar deal with the trouble alone. Another group of aggressive monster soldiers threw themselves into a frontal attack on Shuei. The girl focused on the enemy's movements and prepared to repel the attack. The zombie made a sharp leap forward and was able to disarm the entire group of skeletons in one blow. At this moment, they had completed the task from the system, and Yeling encouraged Shuei to move forward to earn a promotion. White-eyed continued to destroy the skeletons, not wanting to let her master down. And finally, a golden glow appeared around her, which was the result of a level increase. Yeling was surprised when he saw that along with leveling up, the system rewarded them with a free point. The young man realized that it was more important for him to pump the familiar at the moment, so he gave the point to her. Thus, the brunette improved Shuei's resistance to magic so that she could deal with the mages. All the low-level skeletons nearby had been destroyed, but there were elite skeleton officers nearby. Yeling suggested that the familiar go and look for them, and the white-eyed zombie was ready to go in search of more monsters. After a while, the brunette ran into an elite officer, but there was already another Tianhui Academy disciple beside him. The young man looked at the girl's face and realized that he had seen this person before. The skeleton officer began to emit an ominous aura and prepared to rush to attack the girl. He leapt towards the brunette and raced towards her, pointing a sharp blade in her direction. However, there was not even a shadow of fear on the girl's face. On the contrary, she watched the monster with a cheerful smile. Yeling was in no hurry to come out of his hiding place and watched the fight and waited for the man to summon his familiar. The skeleton officer was only a few meters away from the girl and was confident that he would prevail. A victorious smile played on the brunette's face, and the young man recognized her as Shan'er. He thought with chagrin that the apprentice had bypassed him and was the first to run into the skeleton officer. Yeling began to worry, for the brunette never summoned a spirit pet, and the skeleton was inexorably approaching. The young man decided to leave his hiding place and screamed, trying to understand. what Shan'er was doing. And just at this moment, the girl finally spoke, summoning the Tsanglun green earth dragon. The brunette boldly watched the skeleton officer approach her and took no action. Yeling didn't understand where the girl's surname was, and hoped that she wasn't counting on handling the skeleton alone. The guy was just about to shout out that this was reckless and give away his location, but he didn't have time. As it was at this very moment, a predatory smile appeared on Shan'er's face, and she called out to Tsanglun. This dragon was a rare species, and was one of the familiars with the highest starting characteristics. The girl pointed at the monster and ordered the spirit pet to put the games aside and finish it off. Tsanglun obeyed and lowered himself in front of his mistress, towering over the skeleton officer. However, the monster was not afraid and continued to run to attack, not realizing that their strength was not equal. The dragon raised its giant paw and pointed it towards the insolent skeleton, about to massacre him. The next second they met, and the skeleton officer's arm and leg shattered into small pieces. Yeling watched from behind a rock, as the monster's aura dissipated, and admired the majestic view of Tsanglun. The brunette mentally noted that Shan'er's familiar was indeed a very strong spirit. The skeleton officer on the floor moved, trying to strike with his sword, but was pinned to the ground by the dragon's paw. Tsanglun's eyes flashed a bright red fire, and rage could clearly be seen in them. A huge clawed paw soared into the air and headed towards the monster to destroy it completely. The skeleton officer could only stare at Tsanglun quickly approaching him. The next moment, there was a loud bang, and the earth dragon ended this battle. A spiritual flame that belonged to the skeleton officer appeared from under his paw. Shan'er took out a small flask and opened it to collect the resource that fell out after the victory. Flames rushed to the flask in the brunette's hands, and her familiar stood obediently by her side. Yeling thought that the girl was actually cool since she had brought a bottle with her to gather spiritual flames. And while Shan'er was praising her pet, the young man thought that the Ho family was not among the top 3 great families of the city for nothing. Suddenly, the young lady turned to the guy and wondered what he was hiding there for. Transitioner was surprised when he realized that he had been discovered, but he decided that the heiress of the Ho family had reached the 7th level of the first stage for a reason. The young man walked out to the school's first beauty, feeling awkward as the girl tried to find out why he was watching her. Yeling admitted that he was just passing by, and the brunette, seeing his face closer, recognized the Tianhui school student. Turns out she'd heard it told at school that he was the first to contract a zombie incapable of evolving. The girl scolded the boy for coming alone to such a dangerous place, and the transient grew dark. Yeling got angry and irritably explained to Shan'er that he goes wherever he wants and it's none of her business. Tsanglun did not like this treatment of his mistress, so he lowered himself to his 4 paws and crept up on the brunette. The humans looked in surprise at the spirit that was coming closer and closer to the brazen zombie owner. Suddenly, the dragon let out a loud roar that was directed at Yeling, and the brunette shook with fear. Shan'er couldn't hold back a chuckle, although she tried not to laugh at the young man too loudly. Plus, she had asked her familiar to calm down a bit and not make so much noise so loudly outside the city. And while Yeling was recovering from the stress he had experienced, Beauty Ho was praising her spirit pet. After a while, the brunette called out to the young man again, forcing him to look into her eyes in anticipation. Shan'er admitted that she was kindly informing him of the danger of the burial ground, and suggested that he return to the city. However, the brunette wasn't going to listen to her and responded to her offer with a firm refusal. Transitioner was still annoyed by this treatment, and nodded over his shoulder that he could take care of himself. Yeling no longer wanted to be around someone who thought he was a loser, so he hurriedly left. Before completely disappearing into the misty forest, the young man threw a cold farewell, leaving the beautiful Ho behind. Tsanglun glanced uncertainly at his mistress, waiting for her reaction to this behavior of the young man. Shan'er was actually annoyed that she wasn't even thanked for her genuine concern. The girl used her recovery seal technique, thinking about the fact that even at the 3rd stage, few people would dare to come to the burial ground alone. Beautiful Ho decided to follow the loser Yelin and see what he was going to do in the grave mound. Thus, Shan'er went after the brunette and followed the young man while hiding behind the trees. Naturally, Yeling noticed the stalker and didn't understand the purpose of her following him. The girl was sure she was hiding perfectly, and watched from her hiding place with displeasure. The young man decided to ignore the beautiful Ho and focus on raising levels just as the skeleton grabbed the guy's leg. Transitioner managed to dodge, and 3 skeleton officers appeared beside him at once. Apart from them, ordinary skeleton soldiers also appeared around Yeling, which made the brunette think that he was trapped. The young man looked anxiously at the crowd of monsters and was upset that he was attacked by so many opponents at once. Shan'er, in her hiding place, was even more worried, and was certain that there was no way a person with a useless black-eyed zombie would win this fight. One of the officer soldiers decided not to prolong the fight and threw himself forward at the defenseless man. The monster jumped up and was right above Yeling in an instant, swinging its blade. However, the young man had time to recoil, and the skeleton officer's blow cut through nothing but air. Transitioner, however, threw his hand forward and nervously ordered his spirit pet to appear beside him. A summoning seal flashed on the ground between the guy and the monster squad, and it didn't take long for Shueyu to see it. The white-eyed zombie made the skeleton officer's attacker go down with her mere appearance. The zombie girl looked flawless and was ready to engage in a duel to protect her master. Beauty Ho was at a loss for words from surprise, as there was an evolved familiar beside Ye Ling. The brunette ordered the pet to go on the attack, and Shueyu entered berserk mode and rushed forward. First in line were the skeleton officers, who didn't even have time to realize they had a new opponent. But the monsters came to their senses rather quickly and began to exude more of an intimidating aura, preparing for a fight. The skeleton officer raised his shield and took the impact of the zombie girl's claws on it. The monster decided it had successfully repelled the attack and could now attack on its own. But Shueyu was moving too fast, so in the next moment she was already attacking from behind. The claws of the white-eyed zombie walked across the back of the skeleton officer's head, and he had no chance of escape. The monster shattered into pieces, making the other skeletons wary at the sight of this picture. A rather strong aura could be felt around Shueyu, and the girl remained focused on the battlefield. At this moment, Beauty Ho couldn't believe her eyes and thought that the familiar in front of her was too strong for a zombie. Ye Ling heard Shan'er's surprise and smugly promised that the best part was yet to come. The young man looked at the new assignment from the system and saw that they needed to defeat 20 skeleton officers to get specialized clothing. Immediately after that came a quest to kill 100 skeleton officers, which was rewarded with an immediate level up. The brunette was excited about the new possibilities, though he admitted that killing 100 monsters at a time would be quite difficult. However, they didn't have to wait long or look for the next group of skeletons, since an entire corral and various skeleton-shaped monsters were bearing down on them directly. This was to their advantage, so the transient decided not to back down, but to utilize the new wild blood. The zombie girl bit her lip and her own blood began to run down her chin. The aura around Shueyu began to rapidly intensify, as the familiar received an increase in strength and speed. Beauty Ho recognized the wild blood skill, but was surprised that a zombie could use it. The white-eyed zombie prepared for battle and mentally plotted her route through the crowd of skeletons, after which she abruptly rushed forward, destroying one monster after another in the blink of an eye. The skeleton soldiers were blown to splinters before they even had time to realize that a familiar had appeared next to them. Shueyu's next target was the officer soldier who wanted to attack the spirit pet first. However, Ye Ling decided that it was about time for him to use his spiritual skill as well. Therefore, the guy activated the spiritual chain and immobilized the monster, preventing it from finishing its attack. The skeleton officer was entangled in chains, and Shueyu only had to make a decisive strike. The spirit chains pinned the monster to the ground as the zombie girl swiftly approached him. Ye Ling once again sent the familiar on the attack, eager to complete the system's tasks. The white-eyed woman leapt forward and the ground beneath her feet cracked, unable to withstand the zombie's force. The wild blood helped Shueyu stay fully focused on the battle, and worked perfectly for a long time thanks to regeneration. The zombie girl miscalculated her actions, and once again pushed herself off the ground with terrifying force. The skeleton officer tried to crawl away from the familiar, but all his attempts to escape were doomed to failure. White-eyed kicked the monster in its skull with a loud crunch, separated from the rest of its body. Furthermore, Shueyu had calculated her strike in such a way that the officer's bone had neutralized a few more skeleton soldiers. The monsters fell to the ground one by one, while the zombie girl continued to ruthlessly advance. Shan'er was amazed at the strength of the wild blood skill, and thought that even her Konglun was no match for the white-eyed zombie. Ye Ling, on the other hand, watched his spirit pet with undisguised delight. In the distance, the guy spotted another wave of skeleton monsters and ordered the girl to destroy them. Shueyu turned towards the opponents and hurriedly carried out her master's order. The white-eyed zombie quickly analyzed her attackers and threw herself into battle with a ready strategy. Her first victim was a skeleton officer, who after a second saw the spirit pet in front of her. The girl's red claws were right in front of the monster's face, and there was nothing more he could do. With one precise strike, Shueyu neutralized Shueyu's main target, ignoring the bones flying around. The monster's lifeless body fell to the ground, and the zombie girl's attention turned to the other skeletons. She used her speed to destroy the skeleton soldiers before they even realized her presence nearby. Thus, the monsters' bodies fell to the ground one after another, shattering into small pieces. Soon, only Shueyu was left on the battlefield, and she returned to her master satisfied with herself. Shan'er was mentally horrified at how much power the familiar of the most ordinary loser possessed. Beautiful Ho felt in the guy as a rival, but decided that she will not give up so easily. The brunette himself was already oblivious to the stranger's presence and went to study the remains of the monsters. Ye Ling picked up another skull from the ground, but there was nothing unusual about it. Examination of several skeletons revealed nothing suitable, and the passerby didn't understand why they hadn't gotten any good luck. The brunette threw out an unnecessary bone and complained about the lack of automatic resource selection. The system took note of the transient's request and reported that it had analyzed the host's need. It turned out that the required function opened with the first level of the second stage, but Ye Ling was far from it. Suddenly, among another pile of bones, the young man noticed a light and bent down to take a closer look. And to his delight, he discovered a small, unblemished bone, which he immediately picked up from the ground. Examining the item in his hands, the brunette remembered that it was one of the necessary resources for Shui Yu's evolution. The boy hid the flawless bone and shared his joy with his familiar, hoping they would continue to have good luck in the future. At the burial ground, they could only obtain two kinds of resources for Shui Yu's evolution: flawless bones and small darkness crystals. However, Ye Ling decided not to stop at one item, so he and the white-eyed zombie traveled onward. The pair walked the mound for several hours, all the while the spirit pet fought monsters. The zombie girl was pretty tired, and her clothes were torn in many places. The skeleton officer wanted to take advantage of his opponent's hiccup and jumped forward. Shui Yu was still using the wild blood skill and didn't even look at the monster in front of her. The group of skeleton officers took their time getting closer, waiting to see how their companion's attack would end. The white-eyed zombie was able to fight, despite her fatigue, and the aura around her began to intensify. The monsters felt a sudden surge of power from their opponent that seemed overwhelming. The skeleton officer lost sight of Shui Yu and sensed her aura above his head, too late to resist the blow. Therefore, in the next moment, another monster on the grave mound was destroyed by the white-eyed zombie. Surprising her opponents, the zombie girl found her strength and continued fighting, surrounding herself with a more powerful aura. The white-eyed woman crept up to her opponent's back and jumped up, intending to destroy the monster with a blow from above. The skeleton officer was defeated, and his head flew aside at tremendous speed. Ye Ling stopped the monster skull with his foot and looked at the system's information plate. It turned out that this was the 20th skeleton officer, and they had gotten special clothes for Shui Yu. In addition, the zombie girl's experience had increased by 80%, although back at the beginning of the day, the brunette never thought that they would be able to level up anytime soon. The young man took out a new garment that had resistance to physical and magical attacks, as well as self-cleaning. On top of that, the blood rainbow garment was impossible to destroy, and Shui Yu needed it. The guy called the familiar over to him and handed her the garment, telling her that this dress had some pretty good features. The girl accepted the gift from her lord, for her own dress had been badly damaged in the fighting. The white-eyed zombie closed her eyes, and the old garment began to disintegrate right on top of her. Ye Ling didn't expect Shui Yu to start changing clothes right in front of him, so he was a little indignant and covered his eyes in a hurry. At this time, the new cloth was wrapped around the spirit pet's body, adding a bracelet of bones to her image. The blood rainbow garment was fully equipped on the familiar, and the girl lowered herself to the ground once more. The new outfit had some similarities to the previous one, but it looked much more elegant on Shui Yu. Another group of skeleton officers showed up next to them, and the brunette sent the girl to try out her new gear. The monsters turned out to be low-level skeleton soldiers, so they didn't require much strength, and the white-eyed zombie massacred them using just the claws of one hand. Ye Ling watched the new fight and noted with satisfaction that the dress was mended automatically. The young man was glad that the system had given them a garment they could wear for the first time. Shui Yu finished off a couple more skeletons as a golden glow appeared around her body. The bright beam increased in size and shot high into the sky, and the system announced an upgrade. So the white-eyed zombie had gone up 2 whole levels in a day, and they were about to head home. Ye Ling remembered that monsters were more dangerous at night, so he called the familiar after him, and they headed towards the city. Late at night, the brunette lay in his apartment, though the city around him sparkled with bright lights. The young man was more interested in the system, and preferred to see how their profiles had changed over the day. There wasn't much time left before the entrance exams, but Ye Ling was going to hurry up and greatly improve his level. So the brunette decided to skip classes, under the pretext of illness, and go to fight monsters. That same evening, Shan'er went home, but she was in no hurry to go rest in her room. The girl preferred to practice her own talent of spiritual chains. The young lady did her best, trying to get her best out of herself, for she was impressed. She didn't want to lose her place in the best spiritual protector academy because of losing to Ye Ling. Suddenly, a man appeared behind the brunette, calling out to Shan'er and distracting her from her training. It turned out that Miss Ho's father had spotted her from the window and decided to ask why the girl was up late at night. The beautiful woman told the man in a voice full of determination that she had seen an evolved zombie. Naturally, Mr. Ho did not believe her and expressed his conviction that his daughter was just imagining things. However, her father reassured Shan'er, reminding her that although the exams were important, she didn't need to demand much of herself. The man put his arm around the young lady and ordered her to go to bed, and Miss Ho didn't argue with him. Just like that, 3 more days passed in training, and finally the most important day in the lives of Tianhui Academy's disciples arrived. Ye Ling stood in the middle of the street, watching the flying traffic and the scenery of the city. The brunette was encouraged by his progress and was confident that he and Shui Yu were ready for the entrance exam. It was an important day in Tianhui City for all the students who wanted to become spiritual guardians. Transitioning watched the city boil and was ready to begin a new phase of his life. After all, the entrance exams were an event that people craved and dreaded at the same time. Students flocked to the center of Heavenly Radiance City, just where the mayor's residence was located. Spiritual energy vehicles continued to arrive from all directions. Chen Zi was already in place and was excitedly observing the amount of traffic around him. He found the airships of the Spirit Conquest Academy, and could not tear his mesmerized gaze away from them. At the same time, the mayor of the city came out to the judges and greeted everyone present with a kind smile. Shang Lin Kong waited patiently for the 4 important guests who apologized for their tardiness. The representative of the Green Dragon Academy bowed courteously, anticipating the entrance test to begin soon. This wasn't the first time Bai Tong had represented the White Tiger Academy, but he also wanted to look at this year's graduates. Mayor Shan remained friendly and assumed that the road of the judges was difficult this time. Ho Lin stepped forward and greeted the elderly man courteously, noting that this was their first personal encounter. Miss Ho represented the Black Turtle Academy and came to the exam for a girl who had broken up with their family, but was considered a genius. Mayor Shan stroked his beard and recognized that Shan'er had an unprecedented talent. The representative of the Redbird Spirit Conquest Academy didn't want to wait any longer, and gently hurried everyone to head to the examination field. Students gathered on the soccer field and waited patiently for the academy representatives to appear before them. Chen Zi actively looked around the crowd, but could not find his best friend among the peers. The guy was already starting to worry that Ye Ling had refused to participate. After all, they hadn't contacted each other for the past few days. Suddenly, the brunette called out to his friend, and all tension left Liu Duyu's shoulders when he saw the young man. The transient was completely calm and nonchalantly asked Chen if he had missed anything. Ji scolded his friend for suddenly disappearing, but Ye Ling didn't take his words seriously. The brunette chuckled and admitted that he spent all his free time practicing. The redhead looked at his friend doubtfully, but the young man did not pay any attention to this look and declared that he was going to enter an elite academy. The school children around Ye Ling smiled nastily and said that Ye Ling was a real fool if he counted on this. Everyone around them knew that the transient had a useless surname, making the brunette's words seem absurd to them. However, the transient didn't care about the chuckles, because he knew that the entrance exam would take away their ability to laugh at him. Suddenly, one of the students noticed the masters of the 4 great academies and the mayor, and shouted about it to the others. The group of students immediately forgot about Ye Ling, and all eyes were on the examiners. Shang Ling Kong walked out of the portal, and behind him, some of the best spirit guardians walked with their heads held high. Mayor Shan noted the activity of the candidates this year and decided not to delay the start of the exam. The representatives of the academies took their seats as an elderly man loudly asked those present to remain silent. The crowd began to quiet down, and among them, Ye Ling was seething with impatience and wanted to show off as soon as possible. The brunette knew he had prepared himself perfectly, and he couldn't wait to rub the noses of all those who dared to mock him. The teacher called the students over to him and announced loudly that he would remind them of what would be on the exam. It was divided into 2 rounds, and the point of the first part of the exam was to survive in the secret limit for 3 days. There, students will encounter and be attacked by the monsters of the first stage, and only those who pass will be able to pass on. In the second round, there will be a battle. Students will be divided into groups fighting each other. The first 10 winning students will have a chance to enter an elite Spirit Conquest Academy. However, the teacher asked them not to be heroic, as their lives were more important than being able to build a career as a spiritual guardian. One of the students was not prepared for the possibility of dying in the exam. The man explained to her that she could only rely on herself at the limit. Ye Ling wasn't particularly interested in that, and he waited for the system to send him a new assignment. This soon happened, and it consisted of passing the first stage of the entrance test. As a reward, the system promised to give out 3 spiritual power crystals, which was an extremely tempting offer. And since the teacher said that the secret limit monsters were only first degree, Ye Ling decided that it would be pretty easy. Suddenly there was a shout from some guy beside the brunette who was excited to see Shan'er herself. The girl herself at that moment stood in the front row and tried to find a transient in the crowd of students. The young man thought that since the secret limit would only have monsters of the first stage, he would easily pass this stage. Suddenly he heard someone beside him actively calling attention to the brilliant Miss Ho, while Shan'er herself was looking at the people around her in an attempt to find Ye Ling. The disciples around began to actively whisper, for everyone knew that Shan'er was an amazing talent. These words atomized the brunette's interest in wrestling, and he was about to compete with the beautiful Ho. Tension hovered among the students, but each of them wanted to rather show what they could do. Mayor Shan began to create a portal to the secret limit, and the entrance exams officially began. The disciples heard that the first round test had begun, and people began to flock to the portal. The examiners pushed the students, explaining to them that the faster they were in the secret limit, the better chance they had of finding a better position. The first to enter the secret limit was Shan'er, and after her, the rest of the disciples began to enter. The representative of the Black Turtle Academy watched the girl with a smile and recognized that the brunette was good. Baitong by this time had already taken a close look at the contestants and singled out Yeling for himself. The man informed Miss Ho that he thought the latest entrant was quite interesting. Everyone knew that Teacher Bai had sharp eyesight, but the judges also remembered that the entrance to the secret limit was based on academic performance. The transient was not concerned about his place in line as he was confident in his abilities. Plus, for him, the first location of the entrance exam was a great place for farming. It was finally the brunette's turn, and he stood right in front of the portal, ready to start a new life. There were several different locations in the secret limit, and each location had a certain type of monster. The portal threw the students into various places. Someone got lucky and landed in a clearing among the bushes. Some students immediately found themselves in the water and had to continue their challenge wet. But there were those who were the unluckiest and started their exam in the middle of the desert. When Yeling was transported to the secret limit, he felt a strong cold wind rubbing his hair. Looking around, the guy realized pretty quickly that he had been teleported to the top of a mountain. Since the place was dangerous, the brunette decided that it would be best to immediately summon Shueyu. Yeling did so, and a second later the white-eyed zombie stood beside him, ready to follow orders. Familiar didn't look tired at all, even though she had spent 3 days in a row fighting for the sake of leveling up. The transient informed Shueyu that he wanted to descend the mountain and then move on to the rest of the plain. Together they managed the descent fairly quickly and took a leisurely stroll through the forest at the foot of the mountain. Yeling was surprised by the fact that they hadn't encountered any entrants or monsters in a long time. As if hearing him, the first monster appeared above the pair and went unnoticed for a while. The animal let out a loud squeal that made the brunette cover his ears and lose concentration for a few seconds. The young man looked up and found a steel-winged crow hovering above them. The guy told Shueyu that it was considered a stage 4 monster, but judging from the length of the wings in their case, it was a chick. The monster kept circling above the brunette, so he ordered the familiar to teach the raven how a real bird should behave. The spirit pet entered attack mode and focused her gaze on her new target. The next moment, the white-eyed zombie pushed off the ground and soared into the sky. Using her enhanced strength and speed, Shueyu was able to get close to the monster. The familiar struck a steel-winged crow chick and a few feathers flew to the ground. The bird screamed exhaustedly and tried to get away from another collision with the zombie girl. Yeling saw the monster hurriedly flying away and promised that she wouldn't be so lucky next time. This situation made the brunette feel a little sorry that Shueyu couldn't fly, and he decided that he would catch a flying familiar next time. The steel crow chick didn't fly far, but it didn't go too low to the white-eyed zombie either. Brunette our cave at the foot of the mountain and decided to stay in it to have a place to sleep. The flying monster once again raised its voice, causing Yeling to cover his ears irritably. The young man was seriously getting angry, for the crow had been chasing them all day and was not going to leave them alone. Furthermore, the guy noticed that the chick was afraid of Shueyu, but still wanted to try to attack the man. Transitioner wanted to come up with a plan and lure the monster in, so he left the familiar in the cave. And Yeling himself stepped into the open space and began to actively shout to the crow, demanding it to take active action. The steel-winged crow screeched unhappily but didn't go down, showing that she wasn't that stupid. The young man admitted defeat and ventured further away from the cave to force the bird to lower its altitude. The brunette ran forward and the monster flew after, not a step behind its prey. Yeling stopped in the thicket and was sure that the monster would feel safe in it and attack. The steel-winged crow chick became more aggressive and lurched sharply over the guy, carping loudly. The bird then spread its wings, and its sharp steel feathers swiftly flew towards the transient. The young man praised the cleverness of the crow, but unfortunately for her, he was prepared for something like this. Yeling used a spiritual shield, and was confident that he could easily survive this attack. However, to his surprise, the monster had very strong feathers that were not so easy to stop. The steel-winged crow began to swoop down, about to pierce the shield with its beak, and the brunette realized he wouldn't stand a chance against it. So he made the decision to destroy the shield and try to grab the chick with his spiritual chains. The monster tried to fly out of the trap, but she was already surrounded, and the iron clenched around her body. The brunette firmly secured the steel-winged crow's chick, not allowing it to escape. After which, he sealed his technique with a seal on the ground, and the bird hung helplessly in the air. It was the perfect moment to get rid of the annoying monster, and Yeling summoned the familiar. Shueyu realized that she was required to destroy the monster and was by its side in just a few seconds. The claws reappeared on the white-eyed zombie's hands, and she leaped into the air to finish the animal off. The chick screamed desperately and thrashed around in the air trying to get out, but it was all to no avail. Then the steel-winged crow started throwing its iron feathers, but that didn't stop the zombies either. The girl was falling straight for the bird, and didn't even pay attention to the wound when the feather grazed her cheek. Shueyu's sharp claws reached their target, and the battle with the monster was over, and the spiritual chains dissolved into thin air. The brunette was curious to see if anything useful had fallen off the monster, so he stepped closer. With a quick look around, the fledgling Yeling discovered high-level resources that were useless to him for now. The feather, claw, and beak of the steel-winged crow were needed on the second step, and the young man wanted to get there as soon as possible. However, in addition to resources, the passerby also received an elite sirloin, which was usually only available at 5-star restaurants. So the guy put the bird on his shoulder and carried it into the cave, while wondering from the familiar what zombies eat. On the soccer field, the eliminated participants were already there, and Yeling was just broadcasting on the screen. Huoling was interested in the student who had easily defeated a 4th-level first-stage steel-winged crow. Baitong also praised the young man's strength, and Liu Feng admitted that he was curious to see what kind of rare familiar he was, and how he would show himself next. And while Hongshu was regretting the fact that their academy only accepted girls, the mayor was brought the data about Ye Ling. Shang Lin Kong glanced at the report and began to recall the class that the person of interest was in. However, when the man found the young man on the list, he was shocked to the core and choked on his coffee. Mayor Shan jumped up from his seat in an attempt to cough, which drew the attention of the other examiners. On the screen, academy representatives were able to see the characteristics of the white-eyed zombie. Ho Lin couldn't sit still either when she realized that the unusual familiar turned out to be a zombie. The examiners were looking at the questionnaire trying to see if there was some mistake. Baitong noticed that Shuei Yu had also evolved, which shocked the others even more. All because in their world it was believed that zombies were incapable of evolving. However, the representative of the White Tiger Academy was ready to take the guy to him and find out the whole truth. Meanwhile, in a secret limit in the mountains, there was a huge green snake that was peacefully sleeping. At her tail sat Liu Wu, confident that he could spend the entire ordeal under the protection of the giant python. He believed that no fool would go near a poisonous snake, and his own odor was hidden by a black viper. From his seat, the student could see the rising smoke and marveled that there was some fool who had thought to draw attention to himself at night. The monsters became more dangerous at night, but Ye Ling and the white-eyed zombie didn't really care about that. So the brunette built a fire and cooked himself a delicacy, since he had learned that his familiar did not consume food. The young man took the first bite of the juicy meat and felt the real pleasure of eating. Everything about the steel-winged bird's neck was perfect, and Ye Ling understood why it was considered an elite treat. Shuei Yu couldn't understand it, but she still watched her master eating with interest. Her attention was diverted by a quiet sound nearby, and the white-eyed zombie quickly shifted her gaze there. The brunette also heard the arrival of the new guests, but was in no hurry to interrupt his meal. There was a whole pack of monsters lurking in the bushes, and the zombie girl walked toward the suspicious sounds. The monsters saw the familiars approach and realized that the need to hide was gone. A pack of wolves appeared in the clearing, and they all darted forward at the smell of juicy poultry meat. Shuei Yu stopped in front of her master and obediently awaited his instructions. It turned out that Ye Ling had purposely prepared the food in the middle of the night, intending to earn more experience. The opponent was indeed a worthy opponent, for right in front of the zombie stood the Devil Wolf King of the 7th level of the first stage. The situation was complicated by the fact that the wolf was not alone, but the brunette had faith in his familiar. However, before sending the spirit pet into battle, he asked Shu not to underestimate the monster. After that, he let the white-eyed zombie fight, and the Devil Wolf King ordered his pack to attack as well. The smaller gray wolves rushed at the girl, who wasn't going to stand by. Shuei Yu jumped to meet them, disarming 2 wolves at once, and landed in the epicenter of the pack. The monster attempted to attack the zombie from the back, but was met with failure as the familiar spotted the movement behind in time. The spirit pet threw the devil wolf away with a leg kick, not even using her special skills. At this time, the king whom the young man had managed to notice was rapidly approaching Ye Ling. The white wolf wanted to attack the man from above, so after getting close enough, he jumped. The brunette was unable to defend himself on his own and needed to get the zombie's attention. Shuei Yu heard her master's call and used the wild blood skill to speed up. This helped the girl to reach the student in time and grab the Devil Wolf King by the jaws. The rest of the pack rushed to the aid of their leader, but the white-eyed zombie had plenty of time to attack. The girl first threw the white wolf away from Ye Ling, and then prepared to strike with her claws. With quick and deft movements, the familiar hurt all the little wolves and hurt their king. The monster squeaked in pain, but was still on its feet, intent on getting revenge on the zombie. However, the Devil Wolf King's one eye was already heavily damaged, giving Shuei Yu an advantage. The brunette marveled at his spirit pet's abilities, though he realized that the zombie was already at the 9th level of the first stage. However, the monster had no plans to retreat despite the clear gap in their strength. The Devil Wolf King used one of his talents and became faster and stronger than before. The monster rushed to attack at its full speed in an attempt to catch Shuei Yu defenseless. The girl was faster and managed to jump up at the last moment, leaving the wolf with nothing. The white-eyed zombie landed on top of the monster before it could harm Ye Ling. The Devil Wolf King leaned back, and another monster of the secret limit was defeated. The young man headed towards the monster's body to inspect if something worthwhile had fallen out this time as well. The brunette was in for a pleasant surprise, in the form of a devil wolf heart, as well as the essence of bloody darkness. The audience watched this fight from the screen and couldn't believe they hadn't seen this strong student before. Yeling's teacher was more shocked than anyone else, and sincerely didn't understand where the guy got his surname from. At the same time, injured or frightened applicants continued to fall onto the soccer field. Therefore, Mayor Shan had to remind employees that they should take care of students who did not make it past the first round. Many students were crushed by their defeat and were ready to beg for another chance. But unfortunately, those people who were eliminated in the first round were doomed to be ordinary people all their lives. The teacher recognized that the spiritual guardian exam was cruel and dangerous, but it was the only way to select worthy candidates. The spectators continued to watch Yeling's progress, and they began to worry about whether he was too strong. The examiners in turn were more concerned about who would get the gifted student, although Bai Tong had already claimed him. Ho Lin originally didn't bet on the guy who ranked lowest in the initial rankings, but after the first day in the secret limit, the girl was genuinely interested in his unusual surname. The representative of the Green Dragon Academy kept her interest, and Mayor Shan even had to calm down the examiners. The man reminded them that the trial wasn't over yet, so they should keep watching in the secret limit. Meanwhile, Yeling noticed that after the battle, the entire cave was stained with the blood of the Wolf King. And since the guy knew it would attract more monsters, it was decided to find a new safe place. Jueyu obediently followed as she suddenly froze abruptly and informed her master of the new circumstances. The brunette didn't understand what his familiar was saying, but the white-eyed zombie got ready to fight. In the next second, a giant poisonous python appeared in front of them, catching up with one of the students. The snake demolished all obstacles in its path as if they didn't exist at all. The giant python with poisonous scales like Shueyu had a 9th level first stage and was actively trying to eat Liu Wu. The white-eyed zombie defended her master, and the young man himself was confused when he recognized the boy as the school bully. It turned out that Liu had fallen asleep and accidentally woke the dangerous monster with his snoring and was now forced to flee. The python's red eyes were scrutinizing its victim, and the snake clearly had no intention of letting the guy go alive. The monster used its skill and spat venom directly at Liu Wu, who was crying for help. He was lucky, and the python's spit didn't hit him, but the young man stumbled and was in a very vulnerable position. The bully tried to get up and saw that he had stumbled into the unlucky Yeling looking for help. Liu Wu was happy about this, and decided for himself that if he didn't pass the exams, he would take the insolent brunette with him. The student had strength and ran as hard as he could towards the young man and his familiar, trying to sick the python on them. Shueyu watched Liu Wu's desperate actions in shock, and the movements also didn't understand what was happening. The school bully jumped on the brunette and yelled throatily that Yeling would die soon. The bully was about to teleport from the secret limit at the last moment, only for the snake to force the brunette to retreat. The zombie girl and the displaced man managed to jump back at the last moment, and remained unharmed. And Liu Wu used the rescue button and the portal carried him back to the soccer field. The school bully fell from a small height and medics immediately began converging on him. One of the workers asked the student to follow him so they could treat the wound. But Liu Wu didn't want to go anywhere, so he wrenched his healthy arm out of the medical worker's grip. And afterward, with a crazy smile, he raised his eyes to the screen to see the result of his efforts. The school bully saw Yeling's image on the screen and shouted that he would watch this loser die. The examiners watched the tense situation and wondered if the brunette had any chance of winning. Liu Feng emotionally jumped up from his seat and shouted that a beginner would never be able to handle this python. Bai Tong still had faith in the young man and even offered the representative of the Green Dragon Academy a bet. The representative of the White Tiger Academy was willing to bet 50,000 Federation points that Yeling would win. Liu Feng decided to accept the bet and bet 50,000 points that the young man would choose to flee. Hongshu couldn't help herself and also bet that the brunette had decided to run away from the ordeal. Mentor Ho was the only one who remained silent, but Bai Tong decided to find out what she thought anyway. The girl smiled softly and bet that Yeling would either be expelled or die. The bets were accepted, though the representative of the Green Dragon Academy wanted the mayor's opinion. Shang Lin Kong chose to refrain from arguing and simply observe the result of the fight. At this time, the brunette was assessing his chances. He realized that attacking head-on was not an option, and his level 1 spiritual skills were useless. However, he had 1 point in reserve, so Yeling decided to upgrade the quality of his spiritual chain skill. The guy noticed that he would need twice as much spiritual energy after his promotion, which meant he could use this technique 3 times. So it was decided to wait for the perfect moment and dodge the poison. The brunette dodged another spit of venom and waited for the right moment to attack. Yeling ran to the side and ordered the familiar to dodge the poison at all costs. Shueyu listened to her master, but as soon as she saw an opportunity to attack, she moved forward. The white-eyed zombie realized that there was a certain interval between spits and was going to use the recharge time to attack. The girl wanted to get close to the python's head, but the snake put its tail out in front of her in time. Yeling worriedly watched the fight and shouted to the familiar that the monster's poison was acidic. Shueyu landed just as the green liquid was only a few centimeters away from her body. The spirit pet abruptly jumped aside, barely managing to dodge the monster's attack. The zombie was once again beside its host, and a poisonous mist began to appear around them. Yeling realized that they didn't have time for a long battle and decided that it was time to end the fight as soon as possible. The young man used his pumped skill, and a level 2 spiritual chain appeared around the python. First of all, the brunette tried to fix the monster's head and deny it the ability to use the poison. The guy tightened the shackles on the monster's body and signaled his spirit pet to attack. The white-eyed zombie soared into the air and was ready to help her master with the destruction of the monster. Zhuoyu swiped her claws across the poison python's neck, causing it to hiss in pain. Yeling clenched his spiritual chains tighter around the monster, and this was the decisive action in their fight. The giant body of the venomous python fell to the ground with a loud clatter, and the brunette praised the familiar for a job well done. A stunned rumble rose among the spectators as they tried to realize the fact that the underdog had killed such a powerful monster. Liu Wu was most astonished, and anger overwhelmed him from realizing that Yeling was still at the secret limit. The examiners, on the other hand, noted that the brunette had possessed a second-stage spiritual chain in less than half a year. Mayor Shan didn't share their excitement, for he was more interested in the fact that he hadn't noticed such a genius while he was in the academy. Bai Tong smiled happily and reminded the other representatives that they had lost the bet. Ho Lin cheerfully declared that the 50,000 was worth it, and stood up under the pretext that she needed to excuse herself to the restroom. In fact, the girl was concerned about Yeling's talent and wanted to tell the principal about it to get the guy. At this time, the young man collected some resources from the beast. Thus, they obtained poisonous scales and the gallbladder of the python. Transitioning was glad that they had gotten more high-level resources, for Shueyu was close to reaching the 10th level. Suddenly, the silence of the night was shattered by the loud howl of a demonic wolf that echoed not far from the pair. It turned out that the beautiful Ho, along with her land dragon, had also stumbled upon a pack of wolves. The brunette immediately noted that the enemy vastly outnumbered them. In addition, the Wolf King was the same level as Chang Lun, making the battle not the easiest. An 8th-level first-stage monster howled, and its minions swarmed to attack. The Earth Dragon prepared for battle, trying to keep track of the fast little targets. Zhang Lun roared and effortlessly repelled the frontal attack of the 2 demonic wolves. At this moment, a growl sounded behind the familiars. When Shan'er turned around, she saw 2 more monsters. The Earth Dragon couldn't react in time, and the monster sunk its fangs into the spirit pet's shoulder. 3 more individuals of devil wolves were already running head-on, which Zhang Lun tried to scare away with an intimidating growl. Beauty Ho was worried about her familiar and realized that the dragon wouldn't have enough speed, so they needed to retreat. The brunette jumped onto the dragon's back as quickly as possible, and the spirit pet took to the air. Except that the Devil Wolf King wasn't going to let them go so easily and jumped after them. Shan'er shouted to the familiars that they couldn't risk everything and fight these monsters. The land dragon began to gain altitude, but they had clearly underestimated their opponent from the start. The white wolf managed to grab Sanglun's paw, and with its claws, the beast dug into the skin, helping itself to hold the grip. Beautiful Ho was very worried about the familiar, but there was no way she could help him. The rest of the pack members ran after their king, and Shan'er thought that she might die here like this without even passing the first round. Due to the attack of the Devil Wolf King, the Dragon of Earth was forced to descend to Earth once again. The brunette realized this was the end and wasn't going to let Sanglun die, even if it meant they failed the exam. The girl was about to press the teleport button when suddenly the small wolves were thrown back. Their king also let Sanglun go, and Shan'er realized that she knew the spirit pet that was helping them. When the pack was defeated, the white-eyed zombie stopped beside Yeling. Beautiful Ho saw her rescuers as the brunette suddenly started to move closer and recognized the familiar. The brunette also remembered the amazing guy with the unusual surname. Transitioner took the opportunity to notice that the lauded land dragon was badly wounded. The examiners were impressed with Yeling's another success, but the talent that Mentor Ho came for didn't leave a good impression. Bai Tong even thought about Shan'er having to teleport away, but Lin advised him not to jump to conclusions. The White Tiger Academy representative smirked gloatingly and admitted that he wouldn't help another student. After all, it was an exam in which the more people, the more competitors. The Devil Wolf King was able to rise and stood before the white-eyed zombie to avenge his kin. Yeling ordered the familiar to activate the wild blood skill, and a threatening aura began to rage around Shueyu. The zombie girl became even faster than before and was able to jump over a large white wolf. She decided to start with the ordinary monsters who were already rushing to stand in defense of their king. However, they had no chance of winning, and the familiar easily slew all of them with a single blow. The Devil Wolf King felt that he couldn't win this fight and intended to retreat, but Yeling was unwilling to allow his opponent such liberty and ordered his spirit pet to destroy the monster. The white-eyed zombie rushed after the king, and he realized he wouldn't be able to escape in time. The beast decided to use its strength to the maximum and focused its full attention on Shueyu. Thus, both the monster and the familiar were in the air and about to meet in a jump. Shan'er couldn't tear her astonished gaze away from the white-eyed zombie and admitted aloud that her skill was amazing. Suddenly, Yeling ordered Sanglun to step aside, and as soon as he did so, a defeated monster fell in its place. Beautiful Ho found it hard to believe that in just a month the young man had become so strong and had also saved her. The brunette went to gather resources from the wolves, making Shan'er wonder why he wasn't paying attention to the school's beauty. The girl decided to thank him for saving her, and Yeling advised her to hide away from the blood-drenched clearing. The young lady was embarrassed at the thought of being worried about her and awkwardly asked to go on together. Transitioner was in no hurry to accept the offer and gave himself time to think about it. The brunette realized that it would be troublesome and he was better off alone, but Sanglun was badly hurt. Shan'er guessed that she was perceived as a burden and decided to promise a reward if they continued the exam together. Beauty Ho was willing to pay Yeling 100,000 once the first round was over. The young man immediately agreed to such conditions, because with this money he could buy a lot of resources for evolution. In the back of her mind, Shan'er was upset because the guy was only interested in money, but in reality she continued to smile sweetly. The transitioner approached the girl and held out his hand, making the beautiful Ho wonder what he wanted. Eventually, the brunette decided that the student wanted to pull her to him to comfort her and tried to politely decline. But it turned out that she had misunderstood Yeling's gesture of wanting to be paid for her help. Fury raged inside Shan'er, but she could only slightly irritatedly reply that she didn't take so many points to the competition. Plus, the girl reminded him that they were still in the secret limit and it wasn't clear if they'd make it to the end. The young man accepted her explanation, but handed the girl a sheet to sign a contract to hand over the money in the future. Shan'er was thrown off balance by this, and she openly called Yeling a dork and wondered if he had to be like that. Eventually, the contract was signed and the young lady left her fingerprint on it, after which she handed the contract back to the transient, hoping he would be satisfied now. The brunette ignored the displeasure and promised with a wide smile that he would protect Shan'er until tomorrow. Before moving on, Yeling rather admitted that Beauty Ho was worth 100,000. The young man went back to searching for resources and promised that after he had gathered everything, they would go to find a safe place. The onlookers carefully watched the actions of Yeling and the first beauty of the Junior Spiritual Guardian Academy. Mentor Ho laughed at Bai Tong. After all, Shan'er was more fortunate since the brunette had stayed with her. The other refs admitted they didn't expect the guy to be able to turn the tide and stay in the game. Mayor Shan could only laugh at the fact that the amazing young man had piqued the interest of all the representatives at once. Even Hong Shu had requested the principal's consent to make an exception and take Yeling in. Ho Lin appreciated the move, and the Redbird Academy mentor admitted that she was willing to use all of her advantages. Liu Feng, on the other hand, pointed out their favorite's lack of money. So the mayor revealed that according to their data, he was not from a rich family, and only at the second level. This information caused the representatives to react violently, for no one at the second level of the first stage was capable of such achievements. At this time in the secret limit, Yeling and his partner found a less safe place in the forest. Shan'er decided to try and find out how the former loser was able to become so strong. She moved closer to the guy and offered to chat a bit since the first round would be coming to an end tomorrow. The brunette wasn't particularly interested in chatting, so Miss Ho offered to pay 5,000 for the conversation. After this sentence, Yeling had more enthusiasm and was willing to talk to the girl about anything. As she planned, Shan'er asked how the young man became so strong and why his familiar didn't look like a normal zombie. The brunette realized that he shouldn't tell about the system, so he simply said that Shueyu had recently mutated. The white-eyed woman appeared beside her, and the beautiful Ho was able to appreciate not only her strength, but also her looks. The girl noticed Yeling's high level, so she wanted to know which academy he wanted to go to. The question made the transient think about it, and he suggested that he would have joined where there were more beauties. Shan'er was embarrassed and felt insufficiently beautiful and loyal for the first time. She turned away from the young man, calling him a male dog. However, Yeling did not understand why he deserved such an insult. Nevertheless, the guy stated that it was time for them to move on, causing incomprehension in the beautiful Ho. It turned out that the brunette was going to use the time when almost all the applicants were on vacation to hunt and level up. Shan'er thought the transient was crazy, but she chose to stay by his side. The company didn't have to go far to find their first opponents, as there were already monsters in the trees watching them. The devil monkeys watched the students and quietly waited for the humans to come closer. And once the students were trapped, 2 large specimens jumped on them. Yeling sent his spirit pet to disarm the monsters, and the zombie girl obediently entered the battle. The white-eyed one moved very fast and was able to hurt the monsters badly in her first jump. Shan'er watched Shueyu's honed movements and thought about how the brunette was very lucky to have a henchman. The transitioner asked the spirit pet to finish quickly, so with its next attack, the zombie destroyed the monkeys. Yiling and Shui hunted various monsters for the rest of the night, and at dawn they received the announcement of the completion of the exam. Beautiful Ho was very grateful to the brunette for his help, but the young man reminded her that he did it for the money. Shan'er felt a prick of annoyance, but stated that she always kept her word and would transfer the money to him tomorrow. This was the end of their cooperation, so Yiling was the first to use the teleportation button. In the end, 82 passed the examination, the bulk were disqualified, and 75 students died. As soon as the passer appeared on the soccer field, Chen came running over to him, and the brunette congratulated his friend on passing. Ji examined the guy carefully and was relieved to find that Yiling was completely healthy. The redhead began to comfort the young man, and was stunned when he saw that his friend had successfully made it through the first round. Suddenly, Mayor Shan appeared among the students, congratulating all those who had passed and advising them to rest before the next stage. The first disciple in the academy's ranking was sure that Lin Kan had come down to greet him. Li Shentian bowed courteously and was ready to receive admiring congratulations. The elderly man asked the puckish man to rest properly and to send his father his regards. Afterwards, he walked forward a little more and stopped in front of Yiling and Chenji. Mayor Shan called the name of a gifted student and personally asked him to prepare for tomorrow's exam. The head of the city left the soccer field, and Chen tried to find out how the mayor knew the name of the transient. Yiling didn't know what to say to that, and turned the topic to Ji's injury, suggesting that he go to the nurse's station. The first disciple of the academy asked the people around him what kind of guy he was, and it was reported to him that Yiling was a loser with a disgusting surname. Shen Tian felt the rage boiling inside him, and promised himself that he would personally look at the brunette's strength tomorrow. Chen was impressed that the head of their city knew Yiling and wanted to know if they knew each other personally. The young man didn't want to answer that question and waved his friend away, lying that he was tired after the secret limit. The first-ranked student watched the brunette walk away and asked his friends who he was. Despite the rumors of Yiling being a loser, Shen Tian understood that the brunette was not that simple and wanted to take a closer look at his abilities. Transitioner got home late at night and finally had a chance to relax. The brunette rested on the couch, realizing that without the advent of the system, he wouldn't even have a chance of getting into the academy. He also rejoiced that he was able to get quite a few resources to sell online in the first stage of the exam. The guy was just logging in to check how much money he had, and saw that the federal points from Shan'er had already arrived. In addition, Yiling completed the first task and received 3 spirit crystals as a reward for passing the first round of the exam. The system explained that the spirit crystal contained spiritual energy, and one item held 500 spirit points. The brunette looked at the spirit crystal in his hand and realized that he had gained 1,500 spirit points. This was great news, as along with his own points, he ended up with 2,400 points. A first-stage spirit conqueror could only have 1,000 points. There were no second-stage students in the entire academy, so Yiling should have easily passed the second round. Suddenly, the young man realized he was hungry and decided to have a nice dinner since he had federal points. The first thing the brunette thought of was his injured friend and decided to call him to the restaurant so they could have a meal together. In his contacts, the guy came across the number of the beautiful Ho and was thinking of calling her too. In the end, Yiling decided that the girl had rewarded him with a generous amount of money, and she could show her appreciation in this way. At this time, Shan'er was at home taking a bath after a hard 3 days in the secret limit. Her watch informed her of a call from someone unknown, and the brunette picked up the phone, wondering who was bothering her. Beauty Ho froze when she heard Yiling calling her to eat with him and his friend. Shan'er couldn't miss such a chance, so she forgot about the fact that she wanted to spend the whole evening in hot water and agreed to come. The girl recognized the time and place of the meeting and wanted to say something else to the guy, but the transient had already ended the call. Lao Chen met up with a friend at the entrance of a fancy restaurant and questioned whether they were definitely in the wrong place. The brunette reassured Ji and admitted that they were expecting another guest, much to the redhead's surprise. Transitioner didn't have time to give any details and decided it wasn't necessary when he saw a cab pull up. Yiling pointed at the car and promised that Chen would figure it out for himself now. The car stopped next to the guys, the door opened and a beautiful girl stepped out. Ho Shan'er was wearing a new dress and smiled happily as she said hello to the brunette. Lao Chen was at a loss for words and couldn't believe that the school's first beauty had come to dinner with a former famous loser. Transitioner said hello to Miss Ho and pointed to his best friend, intending to quickly introduce them and go to the restaurant. As expected, Ji already knew the girl, though he felt awkward in the presence of the beauty. The group of friends leisurely headed toward the exit from which the restaurant staff had already run out to greet Miss Ho. The students were led inside, and after a while the students were seated at a set table. Lao Chen admitted that this was the first time he had come to a high-end restaurant, so Yiling reminded him that treats and a friend could eat as much as he wanted. The brunette thanked Shan'er for the award, but Miss Ho asked her not to give it much importance, for she wanted to be a friend to the young man. The redhead didn't understand what his companions were even talking about, but the sight of the food made him put aside all questions. Beautiful Ho laughed good-naturedly at Ji, and admitted that she was hungry too, prompting everyone to start eating. At this time in Heaven Shining City, the Liu family's mansion and Liu family mansion did not have such a friendly atmosphere. After the first round was over, a council was assembled to discuss the complete failure of the family's main heir. The council members wanted the elder to take the title of future head away from his son and give it to a real talent. Liu Wu knelt in front of his father and listened to his relatives refuse to accept him as the next head of the family. Suddenly, the elder ordered everyone to stop the discussion and abruptly rose from his seat. Liu Yun began to slowly walk towards his son and loudly announced that he had already made his decision. His eldest son tearfully admitted to being a useless loser and tried to justify his loss. But the elder didn't want to hear anything from the Liu family's main disappointment. He therefore disowned his son and declared that he would pass his title to the young talent in a direct line of succession. The school bully listened to the approval from the board members and wallowed in his rage. The guy was well aware that without the status of young master, he had lost everything, so Liu fiercely wanted to take revenge on Yeling. The elder made his decision and was extremely disappointed with his son and his embarrassing exit from the exam. So he agreed without question to strip W of his title and pass it on to the young talent in a direct line of succession. The school bully was shattered by this news, for he was obliged to spend his life as an ordinary man, and yet without a title. Blind rage enveloped the young man, and he swore to himself that he would find a way to end Yeling. The next day, all students who had passed the first round of exams returned to the soccer field. Lao Chen was worried about his best friend and thought that he would have a hard time dueling with his zombies, but the brunette promised that he would be fine. Mayor Shan appeared on stage and congratulated everyone on the start of the second round, where they would be able to establish their ranking. The man encouraged the students, hoping they would show what they could do and impress the representatives of the higher academies. The second stage of the exam consisted of a randomized duel between all remaining contestants. If an opponent surrenders, cannot fight, or is thrown out of the ring, he is considered a loser and his place is determined according to his time of loss. Once the opponent loses strength, you can't hurt him or you'll be disqualified. But at this point, you'll often get maimed anyway. Mayor Shang again called the students' attention and announced that the contestants for the first duels would now be chosen. 4 pairs appeared on the big screen, and Yeling was surprised to see that he and Lao Chen would fight first. Suddenly, the system sent a notification and a slew of new tasks were sprinkled on the brunette. They were all tied to winning the second stage of the tournament, with task rewards able to add up. While considering new challenges, the youngster almost missed his match, which was to be held in the 4th ring. Yelin apologized for his tardiness, and the referee advised him to be more careful if he didn't want to be disqualified. The first opponent of the transient was a guy named Tian Chen, whom the young man had never heard of before. Tian was already waiting for the brunette in the ring with a disgruntled face and was ready to jump straight into battle. The young man summoned his familiar, which turned out to be a huge one-horned rhinoceros. Yeling didn't wait either and used the seal to summon the white-eyed zombie into the ring. The girl appeared behind her master, ready to follow any orders. The audience appreciated Shui Yu's beauty and couldn't understand why the spirit pet looked like a human. Some even had doubts about whether the girl was really a familiar, but everyone could see perfectly well that she was out of print. Mentor Ho noted that with the appearance of the zombie, Yeling had gotten all the attention, and Sister Hong agreed that the brunette's familiar was envy-inducing. Tian watched the approaching girl, but the name of his opponent was not familiar to him. Therefore, Chen decided that the brunette was another laggard, and ordered the rhinoceros to attack Shui Yu. The one-horned rhino focused on its target and sprang into action, closing in on the zombie. The beast was several times larger than his opponent, and everyone around him was sure that he was stronger. Yeling was amused by this fact, and he allowed his spirit pet to not hold back and prevail. The white-eyed zombie wasn't going to let its master down, so it prepared to repel the attack. She stopped the giant beast by its horn with her bare hands without moving an inch herself. All of Tian Chen's calmness dissolved into thin air, and he looked at his familiar worriedly. The one-horned rhino was trembling all over, but still continued to try to overpower the zombie. The brunette didn't want to drag out the fight, so he shouted to Shui Yu that she could destroy the opponent. Claws appeared on the white-eyed zombie's arms, and she switched Stoku to lift her opponent. The giant beast lifted off the ground, and the onlookers shouted in amazement, not realizing what was happening. However, the zombie girl turned around and sent her opponent flying without much difficulty. The beast fell to the ground outside the ring, and Shui Yu earned the title of Beast in human form. The referee announced the end of the first round in the 4th ring, informing all of Yelin's victory. Tian Chen was mortified by his loss and found it hard to accept that someone had defeated his familiar so easily. The transitioner, however, walked out of the ring, proving with his win that no one will be underdogs their entire lives. In addition, winning the first round brought Shu 10% experience, and the girl had advanced to the next level. Soon, the bouts in the other rings also came to an end, and Yeling heard that his best friend had won. While waiting for the next fight, the transient was rejoicing in the fact that soon the zombie would advance to the second stage, and he would be able to sign on with another familiar. However, the young man's joy was dampened when he heard Chenji's naked voice and saw his friend's condition. The redhead was badly beaten, and the guy was truly worried that Lao Chen couldn't win in the next round. The white-eyed zombie had obtained the 10th level of the first stage, and was soon to advance to the second stage. The brunette anticipated the appearance of his second familiar, and just at that moment Ji appeared beside him. The transitioner's best friend was badly beaten and hoped that in the next round his opponent would be hurt as badly as him or worse. Representatives of the academies watched the bouts closely, assessing the abilities of the applicants. Students performed well, but only the most capable could get the opportunity to enter the elite academies. Finally, it was time for the second round in which the contestants had to battle it out for the 21 spots. It was Yeling and Lao Chen's turn to go to the rings, so the transient asked his friend not to overdo it. Ji supported the brunette, and the young man went forward, realizing that he should not underestimate the opponent from the second-ranked clan. When the young man stepped up to the first ring, his opponent was already waiting in his corner. Feng Haotian acknowledged that the young man had performed well, but advised him to surrender so as not to be seriously injured. Yeling laughed at the smug opponent and offered to fight and see who would come out victorious. Present in the stands was the head of the Feng family, who exhaled a sigh of relief upon seeing his son's opponent. The man thought that Haotian was extremely lucky that he didn't get caught by any of the three great clans. The young man in the ring didn't argue with the brunette and summoned his familiar. A blue bird appeared above young Feng, fully prepared for another battle. Haotian jumped on her back and shouted that from now on, Yeling may not beg for mercy. The brunette summoned the white-eyed zombie and reminded her that with flying familiars, it was important to find the right moment to attack. The fight began, and Mr. Feng made his first move, ordering the blue bird to shoot feathers at his opponents. Transitioning instantly reacted by putting out a spiritual shield in front of him, and mentally praised Haotian. In the stands, the head of the Feng family was proud of his son, and was confident that he wouldn't lose to an unknown disciple. After waiting out the attack of the sharp feathers, Yeling ordered the zombie girl to use her new blood mist skill. Shu Yu immediately began spraying a blood mist around the ring, fully concentrating on creating a veil. As the haze rose upwards, the brunette continued to protect himself with his spiritual shield. However, the bait worked, and Feng Haotian was distracted as he began to dispel the fog around them. Thus, Yeling had the right moment to use the spiritual chain skill. He launched the shackles and they instantly entangled the blue bird's wings, making Haotian realize his mistake. Young Feng didn't even have time to do anything as Shu Yu appeared beside him from the bloody mist. The blue bird tried to get out, but all was useless, and it screamed loudly in despair. The girl took advantage of the blue bird's helpless position and pushed her opponents to the side. Transitioner was pleased with their teamwork, and shouted that the flying familiars of the tournament would not resist his level 2 chain. After that, the guy abruptly pulled the spirit pet down, dropping it to the ground outside the ring. The head of the Feng family worriedly stood up from his seat when he saw that his son had lost. The second round came to an end, and the referee once again declared Yelin the winner. Another victory helped the brunette complete another task, and Shu Yu gained another 10% of experience. The audience watched the young man leave the ring, and more people recognized his strength. However, there were those who still remembered the loser with the same name, and believed that this one was a different person altogether. Bai Tong praised Yeling's bravery, but remarked that this fight could have easily ended differently. Mentor Ho didn't agree, pointing out that the brunette had been preparing for something like this since he had raised the level of spiritual chains. The second round came to an end, but in the last pairing both contestants got knocked out, so there were 20 winners. After a short break, new pairs were formed, and this time Yeling fought against Yun Yi. The girl didn't have a flying familiar, so the young man didn't doubt his victory for a second. Although the new rival also belonged to one of the famous families in Tianhui City. The Yi family's daughter summoned her spirit pet as soon as she appeared in the ring. The ice bear majestically appeared behind its mistress's back, accompanying its appearance with a loud roar. Onlookers were impressed by the rare adult raptor who had ice magic from birth. Yeling called out to Shu Yu and waited with a satisfied smile for the third round to begin. The referee saw that the students were ready and announced the start of the duel. The applicants did not waste time on unnecessary conversations. Yun Yi let the beast start attacking first, and it was quickly approaching the white-eyed zombie. The young man realized that he would only be a hindrance to the spirit pet in this fight, so he completely relied on Shu Yu. The girl jumped away from her master and rushed towards the ice bear. A frosty aura swirled around familiar Yi, giving him a more intimidating appearance. Yun lost sight of the zombie for a second and ordered the pet to freeze Shu to take away her advantage. The white ice bear rushed towards the center of the ring surrounded by a frosty aura. The moment the white-eyed zombie shifted, Yunyi was impressed by the girl's speed, so she shouted, advised her spirit pet to freeze her. The beast did just that. Using his icy breath, he filled the entire ring with small ice crystals. Yeling observed the bear's impressive abilities and recognized that it was deservedly considered a rare familiar. The freezing helped detect Shueyu and expectedly slowed down her movement speed. As soon as the daughter of the Yun family saw the zombie girl, she ordered a change in the type of attack. The spirit pet obeyed and prepared to use the Ice Wave assault skill instead of Ice Breath. Displaced watched the direction of the new attack and realized that the assault was aimed at him. A smile appeared on the brunette's face, and he thought that he had actually expected something like this for a reason. Action had to be taken quickly, and there was no point in shortening away from the ice bear. Therefore, Yeling used the spiritual shield skill and hoped that it could protect him from the ice wave. The shield took the brunt of the impact, but a crack immediately formed on it. However, this was enough as Shueyu suddenly appeared right above the ice bear's head. The familiar looked up at the zombie and was about to intercept his opponent, but not in time. The white-eyed woman used her physical strength and the effect of surprise to plow the beast to the floor. The bear appeared immobilized, and this caused a wave of stunned disbelief from the stands. Yunyi was also shocked by this turn, and the zombie girl's strength didn't settle in her mind. To help her spirit pet get out of her disadvantage, the daughter of the Yun family used a spirit chain. Iron shackles bound Shueyu, who didn't even try to dodge or resist. The girl was about to pull the familiar towards her and let the ice bear finish off her opponent. But no matter how hard Yun pulled on the spiritual chain, the white-eyed zombie wouldn't budge. This fact puzzled the girl, and she couldn't believe that she couldn't attract Shu to her. Yeling noticed the Yi family's daughter's confusion, so he hinted to her that her spiritual chain level was too low. The brunette then turned to his spirit pet, ordering him to end the fight. The white-eyed zombie easily freed herself from the chains and turned her attention to the familiar. Her clawed hand grabbed the ice beast's head, and the bear let out a disgruntled growl. Shueyu slumped to the ground, and her opponent was thrown outside the ring. Yunyi watched in shock at how easily the white-eyed zombie got rid of her familiar. The audience also froze in shock, realizing the fact that the girl had thrown the bear out of the arena with her bare hands. The raptor landed on the ground with a clatter, and the referee declared Yeling and Shueyu as the winners of this round. The head of the Yun family was outraged that her daughter was won by an unknown disciple, but he was reassured, saying that the girl had performed admirably. The heads of the city's famous families were forced to admit that Yeling's familiar possessed amazing strength. The Yun family's daughter accepted her defeat with dignity, although she admitted that she had never imagined such an outcome. But nevertheless, Yi reached out to her opponent and promised to look forward to Lin's next performance. The brunette returned the handshake and praised the girl's abilities as well, hoping she would get into an elite school. On such a good note, the opponents said goodbye and went their separate ways. Another task was completed, and the system rewarded Shu with experience, and the young man got a body enhancement. Yeling felt a surge of strength, and all the pain in his muscles disappeared as if it had never existed. Soon all the duels were over, and the referee announced the start of the semi-finals and asked everyone to get ready. Once the pairs were chosen, the judge asked the contestants to proceed to their respective arenas. The brunette saw that he would have to fight the famous Meng Yue, but decided that he wouldn't be a problem. Young went to the third ring to face another entrant in a battle royal. His opponent was a short guy who looked serious about winning. The student silently summoned his familiar and black smoke appeared in the arena. Then the audience saw a tall man dressed in armor and in his hands was a sword. Transitioner glimpsed the spirit pet and was pleased when he realized that his opponent had an undead as well. Yeling released Shueyu onto the battlefield and let her go into free battle with an interesting opponent. Zombie Girl appeared in the ring and quickly found a glimpse of her opponent in this round. The referee stood in the center of the arena and, after making sure both students were ready to fight, announced the start of the contest. Meng Yao directed his familiar to attack, while he himself ran alongside, directing the spirit's movements. The brunette realized that they were going to be hand-to-hand fighting and it amused him a little. After assessing the situation, Yeling ordered the girl to attack the spirit shield first, and then the familiar itself. Shueyu didn't waste any time and moved forward, intending to do as the master ordered. Meng Yao kept close to his spirit pet as the undead were about to attack the zombies. In a matter of seconds, the white-eyed woman broke the spiritual shiat and stepped back. As soon as this happened, Yeling used the spiritual chain technique, and the clinking of metal was heard in the arena. The undead soldier was restrained, causing Meng Yao to be confused, and he didn't understand how this could have happened. The student's attention was completely focused on his spirit pet, so he didn't notice Zhu's disappearance. The girl did not attack the familiar, instead targeting Meng Yao himself. The white-eyed zombie barely touched the guy as he screamed loudly, making her stop. Yao fell to his knees and raised his hands, hoping that Shueyu wouldn't attack him again. He shouted that he was giving up, and it was officially the easiest duel for Yeling in this exam. Also, when the fight was over, it caused confusion among the audience, as the fight lasted 2 minutes. The Lee family's patriarch was the most astonished and didn't understand how one could defeat an enemy with a single blow. The brunette got out of the ring and was about to go to the rest area when he was approached by an unfamiliar girl. She clearly knew him and looked extremely displeased when she demanded his attention. The stranger refused to introduce herself, but fiercely warned the young man to stay away from Shan'er. After making this statement, the girl quickly disappeared from sight, leaving the puzzled Lao Ye alone. Thinking too long about the incident, the guy didn't have time as the semifinals began. Academy's representatives were delighted that they were finally getting up to the best part. Liu Feng noticed that the brunette would be fighting Li Shengtian, who was supposed to be a worthy opponent. Chief Li's son was expecting Yeling in the ring and was happy to see them meet in a bout. The young man recognized that the student had performed well, but was sure that the transient would not emerge from this duel victorious. This kind of attitude didn't please the brunette, so he let Shu out on the field, but let the opponent attack first. Li Shengtian summoned his familiar and a stone general appeared behind him. Lao Ye noticed the nature of the spirit pet and told the zombie that sucking out the general's life force wouldn't work. The referee saw that both contestants were ready to fight and announced the start of the battle. The son of the Li family was too confident in his abilities after all. He was ranked first in the academy rankings. He ordered his pet to build a stone prison around him, and the general complied. Shangtian smugly said that Shui Yu didn't have elemental attacks, so she wouldn't be able to break the stone prison. The audience didn't understand why the son of one of the 3 great clans would trap himself. However, Shangtian looked satisfied and decided to stop idle chattering, sending the familiar to attack. The stone general left his master behind and moved forward to destroy the zombies. The spirit pet possessed an enormous size and perfectly utilized the power of the stone. A wave from the ground was rapidly approaching Yeling, startling the onlookers with its size. The brunette barely managed to dodge the attack, and was forced to admit that his opponent was strong. Lao Ye decided to use the spiritual chain skill, hoping to immobilize the general and throw him out of the ring. The shackles wrapped around the familiar, firmly securing him, but it wasn't enough. The stone golem had too much strength, and the brunette couldn't move it. Sui Yu entered the fight, ending up next to the general, and tried to inflict as much damage on him as possible. The zombie girl landed numerous blows on the immobilized target, but it had little to no effect. Yeling understood this, and tried to come up with a new plan that would help them win. The white-eyed zombie wanted to try to pierce the golem's defenses again, but it broke free of its spiritual shackles. The young man spotted the danger in time, and informed Shui Yu of the impending attack. The zombie girl was in a dangerous situation where the spiritual chain had broken, and she was standing right in front of the enemy. Yeling was worried about his familiar and desperately shouted for Sui Yu to dodge the blow. The white-eyed one was faster due to her size, and managed to escape the stone general's grasp. The audience admired Yeling's beautiful and strong spirit pet, and wanted to get one for themselves. Li Shengtian decided that it was time to show his true strength, and ordered the golem to transform into a human. The stone general began to overflow with energy, and Shui Yu tried to figure out how the transformation would happen. The brunette didn't want to risk a spirit pet, so he called the familiar closer to him. The zombie girl stopped next to her master, just as something strange began to happen to the golem. There was a tremendous explosion in the ring, and huge chunks of stone flew around. Yeling continued to stare at the epicenter of the explosion, trying to figure out what had happened to the stone general. The smoke around his opponent began to clear, and a new image of the golem appeared in the ring. Their opponent now looked like a person clad in iron armor. Li Shengtian laughed and said that this was the general's strongest ability. The familiar discarded his bulky form and his body became sturdier. In addition, he became faster and more cautious. Transitioner appreciated the unexpected turn of events and ordered Shu to test the enemy's strength in his new guise. The white-eyed zombie instantly moved forward, fully concentrating her attention on the golem. Everyone around them watched with bated breath as the two familiars flew towards each other. The stone general put his fist forward and was sure that his opponent would not be able to withstand his strength. Shui Yu also put her fist forward, gathering thus the difference in their physical strength. The familiars met in the center of the ring, and a loud rumble accompanied their meeting. The stone general was thrown back, and everyone around could see that the golem's arm had shattered into pieces. Li Shengtian couldn't believe that his spirit pet had lost in strength to a fragile girl. Yeling, on the contrary, became enthusiastic and allowed Shui Yu to continue the duel and bring them victory. The zombie girl prepared to make a jump, taking advantage of her opponent's hiccup. The stone general shifted his gaze to the white-eyed woman, but the next moment her hand appeared on his face. Shui Yu tossed her opponent into the air with ease, and everyone around her froze in tense silence. The girl herself pushed off the ground and jumped for the golem, and managed to be even taller than her opponent. The white-eyed zombie concentrates the power in her left hand and swings it over the general's body. Shui Yu's strike was strong enough to make the sturdy armor of the familiar sag under the girl's claws. The golem's body met the ground at tremendous speed, causing a massive explosion. The audience sees the Stone General's mangled body and can't understand how Ye Ling could be the Academy's worst student. In the end, those around him decided that the brunette was hiding his powers in order to act as a dark horse in the exam. Mentor Ho turned to her colleagues and noticed that Sun Li's son's head actually had quite good strength. Liu Feng was in agreement with her, but Ye Ling's spirit pet level still amazed him much more. Mayor Shan was pleased to note that they saw a lot of great talent this year. The referee made sure that everyone had calmed down a bit and declared Ye Ling as the winner of this duel. Thus, the young man made it to the top 3 and completed the task from the system, receiving a flying familiar egg as a reward. The brunette hurried out of the ring and remembered that the Shan'er fight was still to go. In the second ring, the 2 flying familiars were indeed fighting, but Shan'er was not in an advantageous position. The gust of wind was too strong, and Sanglun couldn't even rise into the sky, and there was no way the mistress could help him. Jiang Shengnan stood on the back of her spirit pet and shouted to Beauty Ho that she was going to win this round. The girl wasn't going to spare her opponent, so she ordered the Hurricane Eagle to use the ability. Several small tornadoes appeared in the ring area, forcing their opponents to expend all their energy to stay in the arena. However, the gusts of wind only grew stronger and closer to the Earth Dragon and its mistress. Ye Ling watched the fight and had to admit that Beauty Ho would lose. The strongest wind currents combined with the tornado surrounded Shan'er and her familiars. The brunette came to observe the fight and came to the conclusion that the girl would lose in this duel. Sanglun stands on his hind legs, but there's no way he can resist the slashing wind currents. The Earth Dragon falls into the ring and can no longer continue fighting, so the referee declares Jiang Shengnan the winner. Beautiful Ho leaves the arena with mixed feelings and is forced to stop in front of her father. The man sees that his daughter is upset, so he encourages her not to get upset, because she still did a great job. Before leaving, Shan'er casts a glance at Ye Ling, and everyone around him realizes that it's time for the finale. Young climbs into the ring with Shengnan still in the air and mentally asks his girlfriend not to worry. Zhang and her flying familiar are strong opponents, but the brunette is confident he can win. The judge announces the start of the finals and adds that the winner will receive an extra gift from the school principal as well as Mayor Shanna. The students are surprised by this news, and a discussion begins among the crowd about the upcoming fight. Ye Ling summons the white-eyed zombie and informs her that they only have one opponent left to defeat. The transient didn't care about the award from the mayor, but he still planned to win. Jiang Shengnan descended on the arena, and everyone expected her to summon the Hurricane Eagle. But instead, a strong stream of energy surrounded the girl, and she called out to the hawkish Whirlwind King. The familiar appeared in the air, and everyone around could notice that his appearance had changed slightly. The bird majestically towered over its mistress, who was looking at Ye Ling's eyes with defiance. Both students were ready to start fighting, so the referee officially announced the start of the final bout. The sight of the Hawk King shook the transitioner's confidence, for his opponent's familiar had managed to evolve. Sheng Nian sent the spirit pet to attack, and the wind in the arena began to increase. With its 4 massive wings, the eagle could create many whirlwinds and direct them at opponents. The young man watched as the gusts of wind quickly approached them, and realized that the Whirlwind King could create a hurricane. The next moment, 2 tornadoes met at the place where Ye Ling was standing, and an explosion erupted. The brunette blocked Shui Yu and put up a spiritual shield, letting the zombies figure out how to defeat them. Zhang Shengtian noticed that her opponent had a level 2 shield and ordered her spirit pet to end the duel sooner rather than later. The girl decided that the best solution would be to use their trump card, and the King of Whirlwinds began to form high-speed wind projectiles. Small whirlwinds formed next to the bird, and the eagle aimed them at Shui Yu. The air bullets came into motion as soon as they were ready and raced towards Ye Ling at a crazy speed. Representatives of the elite academies watched the fight through the screen and were impressed with the evolution of the familiars right during the finals. Hongshu had decided that the Hawk King would win this battle, but Baitong wasn't so sure about it. Mentor Bai watched all of Shengtian's bouts closely, and noticed that the female disciple had a very fiery temper. Meanwhile, the brunette decided it was time to spring into action, and the white-eyed zombie went into action. Shui Yu took advantage of the smoke screen that was formed after the bullets met the spirit shield. The audience tensely watched as the smoke gradually dispersed, revealing a view of the ring. Zhang looked around the entire arena and was confused when she didn't see a white-eyed zombie in the arena. The onlookers were even more shocked as they saw that Shui Yu was perfectly fine. Familiar Ye Ling appeared behind the back of the distracted Sheng Nian, and her claws stopped on the man's neck. The girl felt the zombie's hand on her and couldn't believe that Shui Yu was able to get close to her. Not only was the white-eyed zombie able to dodge the speed projectiles, it also dodged the king's attack and attacked Zhang. Sheng Nian realized that she wouldn't be able to do anything, so she knelt down and admitted defeat. President Shan rose from his seat and was the first to start applauding, praising the magnificent final fight. The man believed that the white-eyed zombie had acted very cunningly when it dodged the familiar's powerful attack and attacked its mistress directly. The representatives of the elite academies also began to applaud, and Mentor Ho praised the young man's bravery and intelligence. Lin wanted to get the guy for himself, but Liu Feng promised that his academy would also take on the brunette. On that note, the second round of trials was finally over, and the judge announced that Yelena was ranked first in the rankings. Transitioner could hear the flurry of applause around him, but he was more pleased with the fact that the exam was over. Viewers in turn were amazed that the first-place winner was a man who had never held a seat in any of the major families. Shan'er walked towards her friend, paying attention to the fact that everyone around her was calling what had happened a miracle. She felt awkward as she congratulated the brunette on her victory, especially after the guy praised her back. Yeling asked which academy the girl wanted to enter, but Shan'er was in no hurry to answer. The brunette accepted his girlfriend's congratulations and decided to find out which elite academy his girlfriend was going to enter. Beauty Ho decided not to answer first and asked the young man the same question, realizing that she wanted to study with Yeling in the same place. The transient never answered because he was distracted by Mayor Shana's voice calling for everyone to congratulate the winner of the tournament. His best friend appeared next to Lao Ye because he too wanted to share the joyful moment with his dear man. Chen admitted that he hadn't expected such success from the brunette, but he was still genuinely proud. The last tasks from the system were completed, and the young man received the grand prize of a resurrection talent. Yeling could have given it to his familiars, but at the moment he only had Shui Yu, who wasn't really suited for such a talent. Ji distracted the guy from his musings as he began to vigorously clap his friend on the shoulder, trying to get his attention. It turned out that the representatives of the academies had already chosen the students, and now the list of names was on the big screen. There was a commotion on the soccer field when people saw that Yeling's name was at the top of the list of all the academies. What shocked people the most was the fact that the Red Bird was willing to accept a guy into its ranks. Mayor Shan asked select students to choose a school on special signs, but many had only one option on them. Yeling, on the other hand, looked doubtfully at the 4 names in front of him and tried to figure out where it was best to join. The mentor saw the brunette pondering over this, and Liu Feng decided to be the first to try and poach the student. The representative of the Green Dragon Academy promised that the young man would receive 5% more materials and would be able to visit the limit 3 times a year. Such an offer surprised the other students, and it was hard for them to imagine how much equipment Yeling would be able to get. Following Mentor Liu, Yuaitong rose from his seat and advised the brunette, taking his time with his choice. It turned out that the White Tiger Academy was willing to give 8% more resources and provide 5 treks to the secret limit. Liu Feng thought that his friend was overreacting, but Mentor Ho suddenly joined the discussion. The girl announced that their academy had agreed to give 10% more resources in addition to 5 visits to the limit. Furthermore, Lin also didn't forget to mention that Ho Shan'er would be studying with him at the Black Tortoise Academy. Transitioning was a little embarrassed that his mentor had mentioned his friend and didn't understand why she had done it. Beauty Ho also felt uncomfortable with this statement but tried to hide it. Hong Shu finally rose from her seat and caught Yeling's attention. Representative Redbird promised 15% more resources and admission to the secret limit once a month. Mentor Hong also didn't forget to mention that the young man would be the first and only student of the academy since its founding history. The terms from the Redbird Academy were appreciated by all present because they were the most generous, so also the transient would be surrounded by beauties. The brunette considered all the offers, but 12 visits to the secret limit a year was too tempting. This became a key factor, so Yeling confidently chose to enroll in the Redbird. All the guys around were excited by this turn of events and wanted to be in the young man's shoes. Lao Chen was delighted with his friend and admitted that he envied him, for what had happened was something amazing. Mentor Hong came down from the bleachers, shortening the distance between herself and the new student. The woman congratulated the transient on joining the academy and promised that he would not regret his choice. The Redbird representative said they would depart tomorrow evening on an airship that would be waiting for him at the East Gate. Afterwards, the girl left her friends to party and celebrate the end of the exam. However, almost immediately, their teacher approached the boys and reminded Yeling that he needed to meet the mayor in his office. The young man went to the Heavenly Radiance Academy, where Shangling Kong was already waiting for the winner of the tournament. The man once again congratulated the brunette on his victory and pretended that he always believed in the guy. Mayor Shan rewarded Yeling with 3,000 points and presented a high-level evolutionary material on top of that. The secretary held out a small box to the student while the transient promised that he wouldn't let Lin Kong down. The brunette opened the box and saw a very rare eternal bone on a red backing. This material was falling out of the strongest undead and would definitely be needed when Shui Yu was promoted to the final stage. Yeling wasn't sure if he could accept such an expensive item, but the principal asked the student not to worry about it. Mayor Shan convinced the transient that the material was useless to him, but with it, the brunette would make their academy famous. The young man accepted the gift and promised that he would never forget Principal Shan's kindness. The man let the student go, and the secretary wondered why the mayor had given away such a jewel. The president replied that Yeling's future was priceless. As soon as the boy walked out of the academy, he met his friends. Lao Chen agreed to train to become stronger together in the future, and Shan'er congratulated the brunette for enrolling. The redhead didn't want to interfere with the couple's conversation, so he admitted that he had to go, leaving them alone. Yeling was happy to see the beautiful Ho and also didn't forget to congratulate the girl on entering the Black Turtle. Of course, Shan'er was a little upset that the brunette would be studying surrounded by girls, but she recognized that the Redbird was a good academy. In the end, the brunette hurriedly left so as not to give away her feelings and wished her friend good luck. Yeling was left alone in bewilderment, looking at Shan'er's receding back, trying to figure out why she had even come. The next night, it was time to depart on the airship that belonged to the Red Bird. The student packed up all of his belongings and met with Mentor Hong, fully prepared to start a new phase of his life. The girls from the academy who were on the airship tried to discreetly scrutinize the new student. Hongshu told Yeling that they were flying south, and on the way the guy could enjoy the beautiful scenery. The brunette was about to go about his business when Captain Yue Hai approached them. The girl called out to Mentor Hong and told her that she had some disturbing news. It turned out that a whole flock of black crows had been spotted in the path of the Redbird airship. Captain Lee went with Hongshu and the new student to the inside of the ship to find out the details. Yue Hai couldn't say exactly where the flock of flying monsters came from, but they knew that crows weren't very strong. Mentor Hong pondered the plan of events and ordered Captain Lee to prepare the airship for battle. Shields were erected around the hull of the transport just in time, for they would soon come across a pack of monsters. The crows were indeed small in size and level, but there were a lot of them. They surrounded the airship and dive-bombed the spirit shield, trying to get to the passengers. Captain Lee called all the spirit conquerors to the cockpit so they could chase the monsters away together. An alarm began to sound inside the transport, making it clear that the transport was facing a threat. Yeling rushed towards the cockpit, and in one of the corridors, he ran into Yun Yi. The girl was also in a hurry to help, so the pair set off together to the gathering place of the spirit conquerors. The flock of crows continued to attack the airship, and they even managed to cause a few explosions. However, Mentor Hong remained collected and asked everyone else to remain calm, explaining that the low-level monsters in front of them were low-level monsters. Shu decided that this was a great opportunity to test the newcomers, and asked Yeling and Yun Yi to summon their familiars. The students didn't need to be asked twice, and they were immediately ready for battle, unleashing their spirit pets. The ice bear sensed the presence of the zombie beside her and glanced unhappily in her direction. The irritated familiar wanted to attack, but his mistress cooled his ardor, saying that they were not enemies now. The brunette looked around, making sure the monsters were low level, but their numbers seemed suspicious to him. Suddenly, the system alerted the young man to the start of a new time-limited mission. The young man was given 10 minutes to destroy as many black crows as possible. The flying monsters rushed to attack, and Yeling was excited that he would receive an extra reward for the battle. Therefore, he didn't wait and let Shu Yu enter the battle, ordering him to kill as many crows as possible. The white-eyed zombie leaped skyward and destroyed one monster after another, allowing the transient to watch her progress with a satisfied smile. The ice bear kept pace with its ally, slowing the black crows with its icy breath. The abilities of the familiars matched each other perfectly, and they became a great team. Shu Yu moved quickly and elegantly without distracting herself from following orders. The unusual spirit pet attracted the stares of the rest of the crew. Everything was progressing well as Yun Yi suddenly noticed that a thick black aura appeared above them. She caught Captain Lee Yuehai's attention, and they saw a larger monster. The presence of the Black Crow King explained the huge number of small monsters that attacked the airship. Mentor Hong stepped forward and urged everyone to be careful because the raven was on the second step. Yeling remembered that the reward increased from crows killed, so he assumed that he would get something valuable for the king. When the monster flew close enough, the young man sent the white-eyed zombie into an attack. Hongshu didn't support this decision and demanded that Shu Yu be returned, claiming that she couldn't handle such a strong monster. The mentor wanted the guy to bring back the zombie, but Yeling assured that he had everything under control. The girl didn't believe the brunette, but since the transient wasn't going to listen, she had to intervene. Hongshu summoned her own familiar, and a huge firebird appeared above the airship. Feather was far superior to the Black Crow King in terms of strength, and the monster sensed it. Mentor Hong's fire kite was at the 7th step of the first level, and was admired by its mere appearance. The fire around Shua's surname began to flare up, and the flock of black crows hurriedly retreated. The brunette didn't want to lose a good reward, so he ordered Shu Yu not to let the king escape. The white-eyed zombie was near the main monster and was able to wound the bird with its claws. Hongshu was surprised to notice that Yeling's familiar was capable of poisoning the opponent with venom. The zombie girl flew down at the Black Raven King and continued to strike him. However, the bird still managed to turn around in the air and start flying away from Shu Yu. The airship's passengers were happy that the Black Crow King had retreated, and only Yeling was disappointed. However, the time for the task was up, and the young man received a new notification from the system. The information plaque informed him that the zombie had killed 478 crows, for which he received experience and growth crystals. Mentor Hong turned to the students and allowed them to return to their rooms and rest during the flight. The transient did not argue with this, for he was interested in learning information about the awards he had received. This was how he learned that an experience crystal increased a familiar's current experience by 10%, and a growth crystal increased the growth level by the same amount. Ye Ling used the crystals on Shui Yu, and the system reported that the girl was ready to start the next stage of evolution. The brunette didn't delay evolution and started the process right on the Redbird's airship. Just like last time, a glow surrounded the zombie and an aura of undead appeared around it. Eventually, the girl's feet lifted off the ground and the familiar rose into the air. Ye Ling watched the evolution process carefully, and he wondered if something would change this time. The white-eyed zombie closed her eyes and her clothes evaporated, leaving the spirit pet's body naked. The zombie aura circled around too fast to be able to see Shu completely. Finally, the process was complete, and the girl slowly lowered herself back to the floor. Now Ye Ling was facing a rare gray-eyed zombie, and several possible talents and skills opened up in front of her. One of those abilities was flight, which consumed stamina, but in the case of zombies, that wasn't a problem. Blood control magic also appeared, which allowed you to control your opponent's body. In addition, the transient unlocked automatic resource picking and received a mystic item. A golden box appeared in front of the brunette, and when it opened, the guy saw a talent card. Ye Ling grabbed the unknown object and began to examine it from different angles with interest. The system explained to the student that the host could use it to copy all the available talents of the familiar 5 times. The brunette thought the opportunity was very cool and pulled the gray-eyed zombie to him to use the card. For starters, the guy explained to the girl that he was going to copy her talents. And after a few seconds, Ye Ling also possessed super-fast regeneration and blood spray. After that, it was the turn of the most important, and the transient pulled out the egg of the second familiar. The young man muttered that he was making a pact on his blood and ordered the spirit pet to awaken. The egg glowed, and its shell began to crack as Ye Ling's second surname emerged. After that, there was something like an explosion, and the sky outside the airship also lit up. The other passengers covered their eyes, trying to protect themselves, and panic rose on the ship. The girls didn't know what was going on, but they assumed that teacher Hong Shu had released her fire kite again. However, it soon stopped, and his flying familiar appeared in Ye Ling's room. The young man couldn't believe his eyes, for right in front of him soared a beautiful fiery phoenix. The brunette was very happy to get a flying pet of epic level from the system at once. The divine bird was immediately a 9th level first stage bird, and had the ability to evolve. Looking over the new pet's profile, Ye Ling noticed that there was no Nirvana resurrection among the talents. It reminded him that he had recently received a resurrection, and had given it to a bird to live up to its name. Under the effect of the phoenix fire, the talent was transformed into a resurrection of Nirvana, and the pet became perfect in the young man's eyes. The transient smiled at the divine bird, and they agreed that from now on she would be called Feng Ju. And Ju liked the new name, and the brunette was delighted that both of his familiars could talk. On that note, their trip came to an end as the airship flew into the holy city. The divine bird happily agreed to carry the name Feng Ju, which was given to her by her new owner. Ye Ling was happy to learn that the phoenix could speak, but quickly realized that it was to be expected from an epic familiar. Their acquaintance had to be ended when Mentor Hong informed them that they would soon be flying to the holy city. After a while, the students could see what the city they were to study in looked like. Yun Yi enjoyed looking at the scenery out the window and noted how beautiful the new city was. Hong Shu planned to show the new students the place where they would be studying in the near future. The airship stopped in front of a 3-story building whose roof was adorned with a giant red bird. The academy representative took the students outside and allowed them to explore the area while their accommodations were being prepared. However, since Ye Ling was the first male student, a separate villa was set aside for him. At this moment, a car stopped next to teacher Hong, and the driver greeted Shui. The young girl said that the principal had sent her to escort a student named Ye Ling. The mentor introduced the guy, and the shocked lady thought she had a transvestite standing in front of her. Teacher Hong laughed and explained that the academy had made an exception and put a lot of effort into getting the guy. The young lady motioned for the brunette to get in the car, and the young man said goodbye to Yun and his mentor. Thus began Ye Ling's journey at the Redbird Academy, who was surrounded by girls from that day forward. The older female students reacted very strongly to the news of the student's appearance, although some thought it was a joke. However, after the lad's arrival in the holy city, the young ladies could see the newcomer with their own eyes. In addition, the academy didn't hide the fact that it had managed to get the young man who had won first place in the exam. The students were sure that the brunette was very strong since they made an exception for him for the first time in the history of the Redbird. One of the girls took one look at Ye Ling's picture and decided that she should get the new guy. At this time, the transient was calmly driving to his dormitory and had no idea what the future held for him. The next day, Teacher Hong met with the new student to introduce him to the principal. The mentor led Ye Ling into the spacious cubicle and informed the mistress of their arrival. Shu introduced the boy, and the woman took her eyes off the tea party to look at the unique young man in person. The principal's face was hidden behind a mask, but her voice sounded friendly as she greeted the transient. First of all, Madam asked if it was true that the young man at the first step had mastered the skill of the second step. Ye Ling was proud of himself and calmly replied that this was indeed the truth. The principal saw immeasurable potential in the lad, so it was decided to send him to the Red Bird class. Teacher Hong volunteered to escort the student to the correct office, and that was the end of their meeting. As the transient left the building, he wondered what this unusual class was that he had been sent to. The mentor revealed that he will be in an elite class with the best students in the Federation. However, the woman let Ye Ling know that he would be watched more closely since he was the only guy. A little later, it was time to study, and the young man came to the office where his class was studying. The girls were eagerly awaiting the newcomer and were delighted when the brunette did indeed walk into the auditorium. The female students kept their interested gazes on Ye Ling and whispered that this was to be expected since they had made an exception for him. This kind of scrutiny made the transient feel uncomfortable, as he was used to being more inconspicuous. The teacher appeared in the classroom and turned the girls' attention to herself. Gao Yu was in charge of the daily activities of the Redbird class, so she informed them that they would be divided into groups of 4 for training. The woman took turns calling out the names of the students, announcing which name group they were in. After that, Gao Yu walked over to Ye Ling's desk and stopped right in front of him. She looked in her notes and informed him that he was placed in the first group and his supervisor would be Teacher Hong. This news sparked a new wave of interest in the girls, for Mentor Shui hadn't led students in a long time. Gao Yu ignored the noise in the classroom and sent all the students to join hands with the group to start practicing. As soon as the guy was outside, he was spotted by 2 female classmates and called Ye Ling over to them. It turned out that these girls were his teammates. The female students looked happy and politely said hello to the brunette. The transient moved closer and exchanged a few words with his new acquaintances. They didn't manage to talk for long, as Teacher Hong appeared beside them almost immediately. The mentor gave the brunette the names He Shui and Sun Ning, and informed everyone that she would be their leader until graduation. Hong Shu felt that since the elites of the Federation were in front of her, they should know the necessary theory. Because of this, the first team was able to go straight to the practical part of the training. The girls fought each other without using familiars, practicing close combat skills. Ye Ling was watching them when Mentor Hong appeared beside them and reminded them of the Academy's promise. The woman handed the young man the map and told him he could use it once a month to enter the secret limit. Since the Redbird class was considered the elite of the entire Federation, the teacher let them go straight to practice. And while the girls were fighting amongst themselves, she took out a small black card and reminded Ye Ling of the Academy's promise. The brunette looked at the item in his hands and recognized it as a secret limit card that he could use once a month. Teacher Hong promised that he would find many useful things at the limit and could quickly increase his strength. Transitioner held a real treasure in his hands and was already anticipating the journey to the secret limit. Once the training session was over, the young man went to the secret limits hall where all the limits of the Academy were located. Ye Ling walked up the steps of the building and heard the female students around him could only dream of attending the limit. But he had earned the opportunity to visit the place once a month, and he was going to take advantage of that opportunity. A guard was waiting for him at the door to the hall, who did not believe the lad had the right to enter the secret precinct. It wasn't the first time the girl had guarded the hall and knew that newcomers couldn't be allowed into such a dangerous place. However, the brunette handed her a clearance card, which was an official pass. The guardian was forced to back down, though she noticed that the Academy was going crazy for allowing such things to happen. Nevertheless, the guard asked the young man to follow her to the end of the corridor to show her where the entrance was located. In the small hall, there were portals that led to secret limits for different levels, and the girl advised Ye Ling to start with the first one. She drew his attention to the fact that one could easily die inside the limit, but it was as if the brunette didn't hear her. Transitioner stopped in front of the entrance to the secret limit of the second stage and pondered whether he would survive 3 days there. At this moment, the system sent an assignment to investigate this limit, and Ye Ling decided it was a sign. In addition, the young man was confident that it would definitely promote Feng Ju to the second step. The hallkeeper watched the brunette disappear into the portal and noticed that the current students weren't taking care of their lives at all. As soon as Ye Ling stepped out of the portal, he noticed that unlike the first limit, he was surrounded by monsters everywhere. This did not scare him, however, as he came for battles and adventure. The first thing the young man did was to summon Shui Yu and Feng Ju, informing them that it was time to attend to important matters. Phoenix sat on her master's shoulder, and the brunette explained to her that they were at a secret limit to increase their levels. Ye Ling wanted to touch the divine bird, but it retracted its paw and ordered him not to touch it. Immediately afterward, Aju flew up and shouted that leveling up was a very easy task for her. The transient appreciated the explosive nature of the phoenix and suggested that Shueyu go hunting as well. Fengju flew above the low-level monsters, and her flames flared brighter and brighter. The monsters sensed the outgoing danger and tried to flee from the divine bird. However, Aju was too enthusiastic and unleashed a wave of fire on the monsters. The familiar wanted to impress her new master, so she spared no effort and made the fight spectacular. Fengju used her pure phoenix form and her loudly chanted, not hiding at all. Ye Ling began to feel a little worried that the divine bird's overly colorful transformation would attract dangerous enemies. As it turned out, his fears were justified as he discovered a ravenous monster behind him. The alpha of the wild wolves had long fangs and claws and looked intimidating without one eye. Besides, he had brought a huge pack with him, and it was difficult to deal with so many enemies alone. Shueyu and Ye Ling were worried about the impending danger, but the phoenix only smugly hummed. The system issued a new task, encouraging the young man to let the bird out into battle alone and show its might. The brunette did so, letting Fengju fight the pack on his own, and the familiar flew straight at the alpha. The monster was ready to meet the brazen opponent, and tongues of flame showed from its mouth. And Ju saw the fire directed at her, but didn't even think of dodging the attack. Yeling was a little startled after realizing that their opponent was perfectly proficient in fire magic. In the sky, the beam met the divine bird, and everyone present was deafened by a violent explosion. The wild wolf alpha was sure that his attack would incapacitate Fengju, and was surprised when it didn't. The phoenix was still hovering above him in the sky, and Yeling laughed when he remembered that the familiar was immune to fire. He smugly pointed at the wolf and promised that this would be his last fight. The alpha of the wild wolves looked up into the sky and saw that the divine bird was perfectly fine. The brunette smugly shouted that Aju had an innate immunity to high-level fire. Yeling was confident that victory was now in his pocket after all. Fire was powerless against the phoenix. Fengju's flames were taking on a green color, and she shouted that she would burn everything around her into ashes. The divine bird used the devil flame skill, and fire began to descend on the wolves from the heavens. The monsters were being destroyed right before our eyes, and were completely helpless against the elements. The young man watched from the sidelines, admitting to Shueyu that he was intimidated by this skill. Occasionally, the alpha of the wild wolves would show out of the tongues of flame, but he was definitely no longer a threat. When all the monsters were defeated, the fire began to die down. It became apparent that everything around them was burnt. The auto-picking function also triggered, and Yeling obtained a wild wolf claw and heart, as well as an entry-level fire crystal. Fengju was proud to show off her abilities, and fairly hovered above her master. The transient decided it was time for them to move on, which displeased the phoenix, for she wanted to rest after the battle. The next evening, students gathered in the dining hall to recuperate after a hard workout. Hishue was sitting at a table with her friends when Sunning decided to see if she knew why Yeling wasn't at practice. The girl thought for a moment, then remembered Teacher Hong saying that the student had gone to the secret limit. The other students questioned this information, for the newcomers were never allowed alone in the limit. Yun Yi knew that this was part of the brunette's special conditions, but she didn't understand why the teacher let him go alone. The information that the new student had gone to the dangerous place on his own had reached Gao Yu as well. The woman was furious and demanded Hongshu to explain how she could let Yeling go alone. However, the mentor remained calm and reminded her that she was the one responsible, but not to worry. These words somewhat tempered Gao Yu's ardor, but she still wanted to know what the teacher was up to. Miss Hong asked her colleague to relax, assuring her that the secret limit of the first step would not be a problem for the young man. Teacher Gao reported that Yeling went straight to the second step, but Shui still thought that the student would do well. Of course you thought this kind of behavior was reckless, but she wasn't about to deal with Hong's pedagogical methods. Before leaving her mentor's office, Gao reminded her that Shu would be the one who would have to appear before the headmaster if anything happened. The woman mentally asked Yeling not to disappoint her, and at this time the young man sneezed in a secret limit. It wasn't the first time this had happened, and the transient seriously wondered if someone was remembering him. Due to this, the guy was slightly distracted, but the gray-eyed zombie was watching the situation closely. She pointed to a place not far from them where dust was rising, and Yeling tried to see what was going on there. When he was unable to see anything, the young man asked Aju to lift them into the air. Phoenix didn't mind riding her host, but demanded to be given something tasty as payment. Thus Yeling and Shueyu found themselves on the back of the divine bird and flew towards the monsters. The brunette felt for the first time what it was like to have his own flying familiars, and thought he liked it. Soon they were right above where two different packs of monsters were fighting. There was another kind of fiery predator below, namely lions that had tongues of flame raging in place of their manes. Opposite the big cats, ready to fight, stood the earth-shaking bulls. Both of them had the second stage. Yeling didn't want to get into a fight with a large number of strong opponents, so he decided to wait until the monsters had a bit of a break. The fire lions rushed to attack first, and the bull boldly looked into the eyes of danger. To defend itself, the monster used the element of earth and erected a dome around itself. The raptors pounced on the shield and used their fire element to break through the defense. Yeling watched the fight for a while, but soon decided that he couldn't waste valuable time waiting. The brunette turned around to Shui Yu and suggested that she take advantage of the commotion and deal with all the enemies in one fell swoop. The gray-eyed zombie took the order and jumped off the phoenix straight into the epicenter of the fight. Her first victim was a fire lion, but the explosion from its destruction drew the attention of the other predators. Yeling rushed to the familiar's aid and ordered Aju to attack from above, while the girl dealt with the enemies on the ground. Thus, Shui Yu entered her battle mode using her wild blood skill. The fire lions were distracted from their original target and turned their attention to the zombies. The gray-eyed zombie landed on the ground in the middle of a pack of fire monsters and used her new blood-conquering skill. All the monsters on the battlefield turned towards the blonde and felt that she was a threat. Lions were really strong opponents, as they were at the second stage, reaching level 5 and above. The monster that was closest to the girl decided to attack first, but Shui was ahead of it. The familiar soared into the air and leapt under the predator, grazing her foe's chest with her claws. When the zombie landed, Yeling worriedly noticed that the gray-eyed one's arm was covered in fire. The flames died out rather quickly, showing that the spirit pet was fine, and the brunette calmed down, remembering the regeneration. Fengju lowered her altitude, and the brightness of her flames attracted the attention of the fire lions. Phoenix let her fire spread around, intending to help Shui Yu. At this time, the news that the newcomer alone had entered the secret limit had even reached the disciples of the Black Tortoise Academy. Students discussed the high likelihood of the guy not coming right back on campus, and they couldn't even imagine that Yelling's familiars could effortlessly destroy second limit monsters. The gray-eyed zombie attacked another predator and crushed the animal's head to the floor. It took her a few more strikes after that, and the confrontation was over. The brunette remarked with a chuckle in her voice that the phoenix should start fighting if she wanted to reach the second step. Yelling voiced his fears that otherwise Shui Yu would kill all the monsters herself, and the level increase could be forgotten. Zhang Shengnan heard the rumors and complained to Beauty Ho that their former classmate doesn't know his place at all. Except Shan'er was immersed in her own thoughts, and she was more concerned about the fact that her friend was getting stronger too fast. Meanwhile, Yeling, along with his familiars, took a break to take a little break before heading onward. The divine bird was lying on the floor with no energy and screamed indignantly, reminding him that he was not a zombie and needed to rest. The brunette laughed at this remark and continued eating as Shui Yu suddenly caught his attention. The girl rose from her seat and gazed intently into the distance, reporting that she saw something unusual ahead. The pair decided to leave Aju in the makeshift camp and went to see what the strange glow was emitting. As they got closer, they saw an amazingly beautiful flower that Yeling hadn't even seen in the federal guidebook. The young man was so thoroughly engrossed in the unusual plant that he didn't even notice the movement behind his back. However, Shui Yu remained vigilant and rushed to her master's aid as soon as she sensed danger. The gray-eyed zombie pushed the brunette away from the flower, carrying them to a safe distance from the monster. A sound of loud hissing rang through the secret limit, and the pair saw a two-headed green boa 8th level second stage boa in front of them. The eyes of the monster flashed with red lights and the snake's head rapidly approached Yeling. Transitioner was surprised by the monster's appearance, but he didn't hesitate and summoned his spirit chains. The young man understood that he needed to immobilize the two heads of the boa constrictor to allow Shui to destroy the beast without any problems. The chains curled around the snake's body, but the animal kept moving, which meant that the shackles lacked level. Nevertheless, the brunette continued to tighten his grip, hoping that he could still restrain the monster. However, as expected, the spiritual chain broke into pieces and Yeling had to call out Aju. It didn't take Phoenix long, switching the two-headed green boa constrictor's attention to herself. The familiar was very unhappy about being interfered with in this fight and not given a proper rest. But despite its ostensible indignation, the bird immediately rose to its master's defense. Before flying towards the boa and engaging in battle, Aju used the divine fire defense skill. Thus the phoenix enclosed the friends in a circle of flame that protected them from danger. The master praised Fengju's skill, but the bird was too unhappy about being woken up and wanted to teach the boa constrictor a lesson. The flames of the divine bird once again took on a green hue, and the fierce devil fire met with the two-headed serpent. Yeling reminded the familiars about the rare fruit, asking them not to burn it, but Aju said she knew about it herself. The monster was being consumed by green flames, and soon there was another huge explosion. Many trees were badly damaged in this fight and were quickly turning to ash. The two-headed green boa was desperate to destroy Yeling and the gray-eyed zombie, but every monster's attempt to attack was stopped by the barrier of divine flame. Soon the lifeless body of the snake fell to the floor and the young man praised Aju, making her happy that they now had meat. However, the transient himself was more interested in the rare fruit that got them into trouble. The system analyzed the item and told them that the item in front of them was the fruit of a dead spirit, a rare material for undead evolution. It was created by absorbing the soul of a dead person, and was just required for Shui's evolution to the next stage. This finding encouraged Yeling, and he ran forward, calling the familiars with him to fight the new monsters as soon as possible. After defeating the monster, the brunette was most interested in the unusual fruit. The guy ripped it off, and the system reported that he was holding a rare material called dead spirit fruit. The young man looked over his characteristics and realized that they would need him when Shuiyu was moving to a new stage of evolution. This was very good news, which spurred Yeling to not linger and continue exploring the limit. That's how the group found another flock of three-headed crows on the first day, which they dealt with the help of a spiritual chain. The next day, a thrilling battle with multi-legged apes awaited them, involving mostly zombies. On the last third day, Yeling encountered a group of fire-tailed macaques and had to run away from them while waiting for help from the familiars. At the end of their short journey, the gray-eyed zombie had been promoted to the 3rd level, and Feng Ju had been promoted to the 2nd level of the 2nd stage. Behind the constant adventures, the brunette didn't even notice how the whole 3 days flew by. Nevertheless, they were pumped up enough, so they headed to the portal to return to the academy. Gao Yu had to come to the principal's office to report serious damage to the 2nd level secret limit. The ranger reported to the teacher that Yeling had burned almost the entire forest using hellfire. Madam Director was interested in this phenomenon and ordered that the limit be closed and a restoration team be sent in. Gao Yu accepted the instructions and wanted to know how the student would be punished for his actions, but Madam was not going to scold the young man. Yeling was walking through the grounds of the Redbird Academy, and all the female students started to actively whisper as soon as they saw him. The girls were overflowing with excitement, and each wanted to take a closer look at the newcomer. The brunette once again felt uncomfortable, and thought that he was not used to such attention. Just at that moment, the system reminded itself and gave out an Eye of Truths and 5 spirit crystals, and experience each as a reward for passing the limit. The Eye of Truth had the same abilities as spiritual sight and allowed one to see information about any subject. Yeling was curious to check how it worked, so he analyzed a red maple leaf. So he learned that the tree was over 30 years old and endowed with the ability to be red all year round. The next object of his interest was Wang Lin Yu. He was able to find out her age, height, level, abilities, and number of familiars. Besides, the system even showed the girl's parameters, and the guy hurriedly left as he felt uncomfortable. Outside the main building, the brunette found mentor Hong Shu and headed over to share his progress with her. The teacher realized that the student had returned from a secret limit, so she asked how it went. Yeling briefly described his journey, and noticed that the girls on his team still hadn't arrived. That's how he learned that the principal admired his progress and decided to transfer the student to the 2nd year. Teacher Hong informed him that he would have to practice there more often, so resources and equipment had to be prepared. The girl gave the apprentice an admission reward and advised him to go to the Celestial Pavilion. And since the mentor still had things to do, she let Yeling go shopping on her own. The transient decided not to drag this out too long, so he immediately went in search of the right store. The pavilion was impressive in size and looked more like a treasure trove than a store. The brunette entered the building and was immediately approached by one of the female employees, asking how she could help. Yeling said that he needed to sell some materials, but the employee noticed his red bird costume. The young man said that he was studying at the academy, but the employee did not believe him and was not going to work with an unknown person. The girl aggressively asked the guy to leave the Sky Pavilion, unwilling to listen to Yeling. The transient was angered by this attitude, and an argument broke out between him and the worker. At this moment, the celestial owner appeared beside them and inquired about their situation. With the help of the Eye of Truth, the guy learned all the basic information about Chen Meng Yao. The co-worker once again accused Yeling of lying while the guy marveled at the fact that at only 20 years old, the girl had almost reached the 3rd step. The blonde girl recognized the new Redbird student, so she ordered Lao Zhao to apologize to the customer. The employee didn't understand what it all meant, and Meng Yao said that the guy was really studying at the academy. Lao Zhao couldn't believe that the Redbird had accepted the guy into its ranks, but the owner advised the girl to watch more news. Miss Chen went to her office and asked her to bring the student to her after they settled the conflict. Lao Zhao began to actively apologize to the brunette, and the guy was even confused by her pressure. Eventually, the transient was escorted to the office of Chen Meng Yao, who noticed that the young man looked better in person than he did in the photo. The blonde was excited to meet a promising student, as she was in her 3rd year at the academy herself. Yeling started to address the girl as his sister, but the pavilion owner allowed her to call her by her first name. Miss Chen remembered the materials the brunette wanted to sell and promised to give a good price. Yeling took off the ring and prepared to extract all the resources he found in the secret limit that were unnecessary for him. Meng Yao asked the young man to lay out all the items he wanted to sell in the Heavenly Vault Pavilion. The brunette took off his ring and walked over to the table ready to lay out all the unnecessary items. Various curiosities that Yeling had collected in the secret limit of the second level appeared on the table. The pavilion owner was impressed when she realized that the rumors were true, and the student did indeed go to the limit alone. Among the many materials, an emerald pearl caught the girl's attention. Meng Yao grabbed it and shouted enthusiastically that she had been searching for it for a long time so that her vine could evolve. Yeling didn't have any plant familiars, so he gladly gave the pearl to his older sister. Miss Chen glimpsed the remaining resources and ordered Lao Jiao to appraise them and pay the brunette a good price. Transitioner remembered the need to buy equipment, and Meng Yao promised that their store would give a discount on them. After a while, the young man would leave the pavilion knowing that all the items he had purchased would be delivered to his home. Yeling remembered to thank his senior classmate for the warm welcome and headed back to the academy. Lao Jiao was surprised by the owner's friendly demeanor and suspected that the girl liked the new student. However, Meng Yao asked her subordinate to mind her own business and read more news. Meanwhile, there was a lot of discussion in the Redbird Academy because of Yeling's transfer to the second year. His classmates were greatly disappointed, for they had lost their only boyfriend too quickly. The brunette was expecting an evening training session with his new teacher, so he walked leisurely through the academy grounds. The young man was busy counting the amount of money he had left after selling resources and buying equipment. Suddenly, on a deserted street, an unfamiliar girl stopped right in front of him. She blocked Yeling's path and wanted to know if the guy was a new student of the Redbird. The transient confirmed her hunch, and the stranger snapped out of her seat, attacking the student. The brunette was able to dodge the blow and panicked as he tried to figure out why his classmate was acting this way. The young man reminded her that they didn't even know each other, but the student didn't think it was necessary to get acquainted before a fight. The girl continued to attack, promising to say her name if the guy won, but Yeling preferred to run away from the fight. The brunette ran the other way with all his legs, finding himself utterly confused. The angry classmate did not pursue the newcomer, but warned him not to get in her face again. Transitioner continued running until he saw Teacher Hong's familiar face among the crowd. The panting young man stopped next to his mentor. The woman asked him what had happened. The brunette apologized for being late, telling me that he ran into some crazy woman on the way. Hongshu was amused by the story and advised Yeling to get used to being the center of attention. Just at that moment, the young man's new supervisor appeared beside them, who was indignant that Teacher Hong had not come to see her after returning. Li Xingyue had finished the task herself not too long ago, but she still wanted to at least say hello to her friend. The mentor introduced the boy to his new teacher and hoped that Xingyue would educate him well. The brunette smiled awkwardly and asked Teacher Li to take care of him in the near future. The woman stepped closer to the amazing student, for she was curious to meet him. She spun Yeling's face in her hands and recognized that the young man was handsome, but a little cowardly. Hongshu decided not to interfere with her friend's relationship with her student, so she informed her that she still had things to do. The pair were left alone for a short while, as Teacher Li decided to introduce the new student to the rest of the group. The girls were waiting for Xingyue in the academy courtyard, and were discussing the fact that the only guy was transferring to them. They weren't sure if the rumors were true, because there had never been anyone who was transferred to a second year immediately after enrollment. Their conversation was interrupted by Li's teacher when she announced that she had brought someone to meet them. Xingyue wasn't going to introduce anyone for a long time, preferring to let the students find common ground with each other on their own. The only one Teacher Li introduced was Zhao Xieyu, and that was only because she was ranked first in the second-year rankings. Yeling's new group seemed to be friendly towards the newcomer. The brunette thought the girls were having too much fun and found it a little odd. He used the Eye of Truth to learn more about Seiyu, and had to admit that she was incredibly strong for her age. However, Yeling wondered if he could top the rankings if he won the girl in a fight. Teacher Li appreciated the boy's enthusiasm, and before leaving for the principal's office, she asked the students to tell the young man the rules of the second year. Zhao Xieyu obediently informed that one had to be in the top 10 to challenge her to a duel. The brunette managed to get a little frustrated when he heard someone's voice offer to fight her. The same crazy stranger who was willing to give up her third place if Yeling won appeared in front of him. Zhao Xieyu told the young man that according to the rules, he needed to be in the top 10 rankings. The young man was upset since he wasn't even ranked, but Wu Xuan appeared beside them. The crazy stranger was in third place in the rankings and was willing to give it up if the guy won. However, Yeling had to leave the class if he lost. The transient recognized the aggressive classmate and Yu introduced the girl to him. Xingyue's disciples weren't sure if Wu Xuan wasn't overreacting, but decided that the young man should make his own decisions. In fact, the girls were sure that the student would refuse, but the brunette surprised them by accepting the challenge. The aggressive classmate looked at her opponent with defiance and was ready to start a fight. Wu Xuan summoned her familiar, about to introduce the new student to the thunderstorm. Zhao Xieyu watched what was happening and realized that their classmate was serious. A thunder bear appeared above the students, and the air around it became electrified. The familiar boasted enormous size, with huge claws on its paws. The bystanders froze in their seats, for many were seeing the thunderous familiars with their own eyes for the first time. With the help of the Eye of Truth, the young man learned that the 7th level bear was at the 2nd level, and all of his skills were 2nd level. Ye Ling was impressed and recognized that the bear would be difficult to deal with, as it possessed a thunder fist with illusion. Nevertheless, the young man pondered over the strategy and opted for Shui Yu's summoning. The gray-eyed zombie first appeared in front of the students of the Redbird Academy, attracting admiring gazes. People were amazed by the Thunder Bear's aura, but the zombie girl's amazing beauty left no one indifferent. Wu Xuan suggested that Ye Ling summon a second spirit pet, doubting that the humanoid familiars could handle it. The brunette reminded her that it wasn't her concern and urged her opponent to start the fight sooner rather than later. This acted as a spur to the girl, and she let the bear rush into attack. The transient completely trusted the gray-eyed zombie, and Shui Yu ran straight towards the thunderstorm. The spirit pets met each other using all their physical power. There was an explosion at the sight of their collision, and everyone around them waited with bated breath for the smoke to clear. Soon both familiars came into view, but neither had a scratch on them. Ye Ling was indeed impressed by the thunderstorm since not many could avoid being injured after meeting Shui. Wu Xuan noticed the guy's reaction and promised that the bear would show something more interesting next. An aggressive classmate caught the attention of her spirit pet and lightning bolts rattled around her. The familiar heard that Xuan had asked him to use the thunder armor skill. The energy around the bear intensified several times, and behind the lightning people could not even see the pet. The gray-eyed zombie retreated to her master, and together they watched the tangle of lightning on the battlefield. When the Thunder Bear reappeared, it could be seen wearing metal armor that was imbued with electricity. Zhao Xiaoyu prompted the young man that not only did the armor have good protection, but it would also severely wound whoever touched it. The Redbird students recognized that this was to be expected from a power surname. Together with the destructive power of thunder, the thunderstorm's impact was unfathomable, and the spectators wondered if Shui could withstand such an onslaught. The gray-eyed zombie took an electric shock to put her opponent on his shoulder blades. The girl pressed the thunderstorm to the ground, but the lightning bolts passed through her hands, damaging them severely. Naturally, Shui Yu and the others decided that without their claws, Shui Yu would be useless and would quickly lose. Wu Xuan thought so too until she was able to examine the green glow around the zombie. Ye Ling's spirit pet was quickly healed before everyone's eyes with the super regeneration skill. Her opponent was annoyed, but admitted she had underestimated the new student. However, Wu Xuan still had a second familiar in reserve, and now the illusory lizard had entered the fray. This spirit Piom had the skill of stealth, so ordinary people couldn't see him. And while for everyone else, Shui Yu was pinning the thunderstorm to the ground, the lizard slowly approached Ye Ling. Wu Xuan realized that she had underestimated her opponent, so she unleashed a second familiar onto the battlefield. The illusory lizard took advantage of its peculiarity and appeared next to its mistress in invisible mode. The spectators watched in amazement as the Thunder Bear was defeated, and had no idea that anyone else was involved in the fight. All of the Redbird students were amazed at the strength that Ye Ling's familiar possessed. Meng Yao had also returned to the academy and stopped to watch a new acquaintance fight. The blonde noticed the appearance of the illusory lizard and mentally condemned Xuan's actions. Miss Chen thought this turn of events was unfair, and she felt sorry for Ye Ling. A WU's spirit pet finally snuck up on the brunette, and a victorious smile played on the girl's face. The aggressive classmate ordered the illusory lizard to finish the guy off, and the familiar leapt to the attack. The transient remained in his seat to the last, as if he had no idea what was going on. It was only when the spirit pet dispelled the illusion that the young man shivered and confessed that he had waited a long time for the lizard to approach. The girl was shocked at what was happening and couldn't believe that the newcomer could see her familiar. It turned out that throughout the battle, the young man had kept his eye of truth open just in case. Now it was time for a retaliatory attack, so Ye Ling summoned a divine bird to the battlefield. Phoenix soared into the air, leaving a plume of fire behind her, and quickly found her opponent with a glance. Wu Xuan realized that her pet wouldn't be able to resist Ju, and began to actively call the familiar back. However, it was too late because the divine bird had already started attacking. The illusory lizard couldn't avoid being hit by the fire, and its body began to be consumed by the green flames. Zhao Xiaoyu stepped forward in an attempt to get a better look at the surname that had suddenly appeared. The divine bird was clearly going to use devil flames because the fire around it took the form of small phoenixes. Jia Yu turned around at her friends, sensing the approaching danger, and ordered them to move aside. Feng Ju actively attacked the opponent's spirit pets with green flames, and more explosions occurred on the battlefield. Thunder Bear and Illusory Lizard were completely useless and tried to stay out of the epicenter of the explosion. The familiars were rushing towards their mistress when they were thrown back behind her by the blast. Wu Xuan knelt down and looked at the phoenix in despair, realizing that she had been defeated. The students of the Redbird Academy scattered to the sides, trying to distance themselves from the intimidating pet. Gao Yu and Hong Shu watched the divine phoenix and hardly realized that it belonged to Ye Ling. The brunette was actively attracting Fengju's attention at this time, trying to stop the unnecessary destruction. The guy reminded her that he wasn't allowed to use the devil flame, and Aju immediately stepped back. The phoenix returned to its master just as Wu Xuan acknowledged his loss. The student gave Yeling the third place ranking as promised and promised to translate all the materials soon. The students who remained around began clapping and shouting their admiration for the brunette's amazing pets. The system, too, rewarded getting third place in the sophomore class rankings and gave the guy a mystery item. The duel was officially over, and the students of the Redbird Academy were approaching Yeling from all sides. The girls clung closely to the young man and tried to find out how their classmate had become so strong. A crowd of female fans demanded his phone number and honored the brunette with the title of school treasure. The boy didn't know how he could free himself from captivity, so Mentor Hong came to his rescue. She and Teacher Lee appeared nearby and shouted to Yeling to follow them. Transitioner took the opportunity and ran up to the women who asked when he got the phoenix. The brunette confessed that he had tamed Aju only recently, after which the teachers sent him off to prepare for his practical assignment. The young man rushed to the dormitory to grab his newly purchased equipment and resources. There, he also learned that the secret item turned out to be a crystallized phoenix essence. This item allowed him to summon a 10th level 9th stage divine bird for 5 minutes. Yeling was amazed that he had obtained such a powerful artifact that he could use 3 times. That same evening, Wu Xuan had transferred the third place money to him, and the guy thought that he should make up with her in the future. He didn't have much time, however, so the young man quickly gathered what he needed and headed to the team. The girls were surprised and a little scared by the abilities of their new associate, but they were still happy to see Yeling. The brunette remembered what this was all about and tried to challenge Zhao Siyu to a duel again. The first place wasn't sure if she wanted to fight, but she didn't know how to say so as Teacher Lee suddenly appeared. The transient wanted to fight Zhao Siyu for first place on the same day, not wanting to delay the moment. But their conversation was interrupted by the appearance of Li Xingyue, who asked if the whole team was assembled. Teacher Lee saw Yeling and confessed that she already knew that the guy had won third place. The brunette awkwardly mewed, and replied that he was just lucky to defeat Wu Xuan. But the mentor immediately realized that he was being modest again. However, they didn't have much time to talk because they had an urgent task ahead of them. Many low-level monsters appeared in the vicinity of the Black Rock, and the city requested the Federation's help. Teacher Lee informed the students that the battles should be fairly easy, but she would still stay close by to protect them in case anything happened. And since no one in the group had any questions, they set off towards the city of Black Rock. It was decided to use a spiritual energy vehicle for transportation since the destination was near the Holy City. Teacher Lee was at the helm and gave Yeling information about the monsters they were about to encounter. A group of students began to look through the handed materials, and in front of them, for the most part, were representatives of the unholy. The brunette noticed the common characteristics among all the monsters and concluded that they would have to fight the undead. Xingyue wasn't lying when she said that Black Rock City was quite close because they arrived at the right place in about half an hour. As they approached the city, they saw that a spiritual barrier had been erected around the wall, with monsters stomping around it. Zhao excitedly noted that there were too many of them, plus she saw several high-level ones among them. Teacher Lee assumed that the environment had changed during their trip and ordered the students to hold their seats tighter. After all, the first thing they should have done was to break through several waves of monsters and hit the Black Rock. Xingyue added gas, knocking down most of the monsters in their path until they met a higher level. The undead jumped into the air and the rest of the monsters followed suit, attacking the car. Teacher Lee hurriedly surrounded them with a spiritual shield and continued to confidently chase towards the gate. The woman knew it wouldn't be easy to break in, so once again she asked the students to get ready. Their car rammed the monsters at tremendous speeds, throwing the low-leveled foulness aside. Soon, thanks to the efforts and expertise of Teacher Lee, the car finally made it to the city in one piece. All of this was being watched from afar by a monster whose presence the people of Black Rock City hadn't even suspected yet. The dead rider was only glad that new spiritual protectors were arriving in the city. After all, the skeleton was sure that all the inhabitants of this place would eventually become his victims. The dead rider sent another wave of foulness upon the city, waiting for the red moon to appear in the sky. Meanwhile, Teacher Lee's team found themselves in Black Rock City and headed towards its ruler. Most of the residents were already in the castle trying to find out from Lord Lo what was going on. The man was forced to admit that they were in grave danger, and there were more and more monsters around the city. However, what bothered Lord Luo the most was the fact that a dead rider had been spotted amongst the rest of the undead. The people of the town were disturbed by this news and couldn't figure out what to do now. At this moment, Li Xingyue appeared in the hall and attracted the attention of the confused people. An aura of confidence hovered around her when she said it was best to attack the monsters first. Lord Luo was very happy to see the spiritual protector, for she and her team were their first reinforcements. Teacher Li informed the Lord that the number of monsters would only increase, so they shouldn't wait for help to arrive. Xing Yue thought the best solution was to attack on her own and wait for reinforcements directly in the battle. Lord Lo trusted the woman and realized that by attacking first, they would be able to take advantage of the heavy weaponry. A group of students were waiting for their mentor on a street in the city, which helped them notice the gloomy atmosphere around them. Zhao Xiaoyu noticed that they had been waiting for Teacher Li for quite some time, and she never came back. Suddenly, shouting was heard near them, and students turned around to see what caused the commotion. Thus, they discovered that the soldiers of the Black Rock City were dragging spiritual energy cannons. Zhao shared with the others that this weapon was very powerful and only consumed dark crystals. This prompted everyone to think that things were much more serious than they thought, as the first explosion suddenly went off. The students of Redbird Academy decided to go to the city wall and find out what was going on. Everyone in the town began to bustle, and the first explosion gave the boys the idea that the battle was about to begin. A group of students decided to follow the city wall and see for themselves what was going on. The Black Cliff Dwellers were installing spiritual energy cannons on the wall, and the monsters were climbing up the wall. The weapons came into action, and the Black Rock City ahead was in for a tough confrontation. The soldiers could see the monsters approaching, so they actively asked their companions to stock up on ammunition. The group of students reached the wall and saw Teacher Li, who informed them that the city's protective barrier was about to open. Xing Yue asked the disciples to be careful when fighting, explaining that it was due to the presence of a level 6 dead rider. Teacher Li was extremely serious when she said that the battlefield could be chaotic, so students should protect themselves. It was time to take up positions, and Zhao asked the newcomer not to run forward, for the dead rider was a terribly strong opponent. The system was in agreement with Ji Yu, as Yeling's new task was to defeat as many low-level monsters as possible. The civilians watched the young men and recognized the brunette as the only Redbird student. Zhao never heard a response to her request, so she wondered if her boyfriend had heard her. This time, Yeling turned his attention to his classmate, but she briefly asked him not to die so they wouldn't have to pick up his corpse. Suddenly, there was a loud bang near the wall, and all eyes turned toward the noise. Lord Luo was drawing attention to himself in this way to tell the people of the city that they would have to defend the Black Rock. With the Eye of Truth, the brunette learned that the man was at the 7th step and possessed strong familiars and skills. The ruler of the city urged his fellow citizens to raise their rifles and do their best to give the damn monsters a harder hit. Lord Luo's speech raised the morale of the Black Rock soldiers, and they were ready to rush into battle. The master of the city ordered everyone to get ready and opened the gates of the city, declaring the massacre open. The spirit cannons continued to blast away the low-level monsters protecting the entrance to the city. Once the gate was fully opened, the soldiers rushed forward full of enthusiasm to deal with the monsters. The low-level monsters seemed to go berserk and attacked the humans with even more ferocity than before. In response, the Black Rock soldiers, one after another, summoned their familiars onto the battlefield. Everyone was reminded not to forget to coordinate, so people with little combat experience had to stay behind. Yeling called out to Shui Yu and asked the girl to stick by his side to protect him in this chaos. The dead rider remained on the mountain and watched the men's desperate attempt to survive with disdain. The high-level monster thought the opponents were just a bunch of ignorant creatures. So he let his fire burn brighter and urged a new wave of monsters to come forward. Huge fire spiders came out of their hiding places and slowly crawled towards the battlefield. The dead rider was smiling contentedly and enjoying his sense of superiority. The skeleton was sure his insects would cause enough inconvenience and eat human flesh. The Redbird students kept close to each other, and Zhao Xiaoyu summoned a flying familiar. Her spirit pet flew forward, and an armed monster leapt to attack the defenseless girl. Yeling had time to notice that his friend was in danger and sent Shui Yu to deal with the imp. The zombie girl plopped the monster on the floor and easily disarmed it, receiving a thank you from Seiyu. The students were among the not-so-experienced fighters when suddenly the brunette noticed something unusual up ahead. Zhao looked ahead and was startled to see a large number of cave spiders. The spiders were rapidly approaching the city of Black Rock, and their presence was very bad news. The monsters were enormous in size compared to humans and knew no pity. One of the cave spiders saw an injured resident who was an easy target. He rushed toward him and was about to impale the girl who was helping the injured man with her sharp paw. Zhao Shuiae tried to warn people of the danger and shouted for them to dodge. Just as suddenly, the spider monster was thrown backwards by an explosion, allowing civilians to leave the battlefield. The students of the Redbird Academy turned around and saw Teacher Li with a spiritual weapon in his hands. Xing Yue quickly informed the students about the decomposing effect of the spider's attacks and asked them to be careful. In addition to Teacher Li, other soldiers with spirit weapons appeared, but Zhao noticed that there were too many spiders. Xing Yue appeared behind the students, rushing towards her students with a spiritual weapon in hand. The woman recalled that cave spiders impose a decomposing effect when they attack. People shouldn't have let them hurt themselves, but Shui A noticed that there were too many spider monsters. The Black Rock soldiers were forced to retreat while the spiders led the less dangerous monsters. It seemed that the men would be defeated when suddenly there was a major change on the battlefield. A lion-shaped familiar that belonged to Lord Luo flew over the monsters. The predator used the special technique of a warrior lion's growl, and the spiders were thrown back with a wave. Yeling watched with admiration at the amazing spirit pet that literally radiated strength. On the lion's back sat Lord Lo himself. The man was swinging his huge sword, helping his henchmen fight off the monsters. Thus, the master of the city quickly cleared the way for the soldiers and raised their morale again. The spiritual defenders had an advantage, for they were now armed with special weapons. The soldiers slowly moved forward, but also shot all the monsters that got in the way. Both spiders and other kinds of unclean things suffered from the projectiles of spiritual weapons. Teacher Lee stayed by her students' side to tell them that stronger monsters might appear soon. In the end, the waves of monsters didn't stop, so the brunette decided that it was time to release Aju. Yeling used the summoning seal, and a fireball began to appear above him. The bright flames of the divine bird illuminated the battlefield, and its beauty caused many people to be distracted. Phoenix towered over the monsters and the rest of the familiars, glaring majestically at her opponents. A lot of people were surprised by the fact that someone among them had a divine phoenix. It was actually hard to believe that such an extraordinary spirit pet was standing in defense of the Dark Cliff. Lord Lo also noticed the phoenix and was impressed with the new generation, for he didn't think the bird would contract with anyone. Meanwhile, Yeling pointed at the crowd of monsters and suggested that Feng Ju show everyone around him his splendor. The divine bird happily listened and began throwing fire spheres at the crowd of monsters. The dead rider watched the ongoing confrontation with genuine surprise. He was sure the humans would give up once they saw the cave spiders, but something had clearly gone wrong. Therefore, the high-level monster applied the dead madness skill and rushed into battle. The monsters under his leadership had lost their ability to think clearly and were recklessly throwing themselves at humans. One of the flying monsters got too close to the Black Rock soldier. The man didn't have time to shoot, and the monster wrapped its arms around his head, sucking out his life force. Immediately afterward, the monster soared into the sky, scouting out its next victim in front of the students. Teacher Lee noticed the change in the monster's behavior and guessed that the rider had caused them to go into a frenzy. The increase in the speed and attack power of the monsters caused Lord Luo to summon the ice crystal turtle. A huge familiar appeared beneath the head of the city as if from beneath the ground, and the surrounding area turned sharply cold. The turtle immediately entered the battle, using element magic to weaken her opponents. Lord Luo asked the spirit pet to freeze the area as much as possible. Therefore, the ice crystal turtle used ice breath, and everything around it was covered in a crust of ice. The monsters were still able to move and continued to retreat, but their speed had slowed down considerably. Yeling watched Lord Luo's next familiar with his mouth open, and once again appreciated the man's strength. The soldiers with spirit weapons took advantage of the advantage given to them and continued to attack the monsters. On the other side, the cave spiders continued to cause trouble for the human army. Yeling riding a divine bird went to their aid. They were quickly above the group of monsters. The transient allowed the phoenix to use any of its tricks, and the divine bird was going to show all it could do. The flames grew stronger and turned green, and silhouettes of phoenixes appeared all around. The bright flames consumed one enemy after another, and quickly annihilated an entire crowd of monsters. The young man was worried that the devil flames would harm the human soldiers, but Aju promised that everything was fine. It turned out that the flames on the battlefield didn't just incapacitate monsters. The humans were separated from them by a barrier that kept the hellfire from reaching them. The devilish fire raged on the battlefield, leaving no monster with a chance of survival. However, the Black Rock soldiers were shielded by a protective barrier and could not be harmed. Lord Luo stopped fighting as he watched the divine bird's skills and recognized that its might was frightening. In turn, the mad monsters learned from their own experience what it was like to fight against the phoenix. The dead rider saw tongues of devilish flame ahead and looked up, spotting a new opponent. Unclean couldn't believe that such a powerful familiar had made a pact with a human. The low-level monsters continued to burn in flames, but the dead rider refused to accept this reality. The skeleton left his horse behind, moving forward with a sharp leap. The rider landed on a battlefield that wasn't covered in fire and began to call out to his powerful master. The monster begged to be granted his powers and to accept the sacrifice of all those who would fall by his hand. Dead Rider genuinely hated that things hadn't gone according to plan, and hoped that he would be allowed to put the worms in their place. The people noticed that a strange whirlwind had formed in the sky and guessed that the rider was calling for someone. Lord Luo watched worriedly and realized with horror that someone was behind the monster. This theory was confirmed when a burning head appeared in the sky and new spirits appeared from the portal. Teacher Lee lowered her spiritual weapon and couldn't believe that the Lich King had appeared before them. Bright red ghosts filled the battlefield and were too strong and fast for most soldiers. In addition, the surviving cave spiders and the rest of the encroaching undead began to advance again, terrifying the people. Gao Yu stopped the impending escape, reminding her brethren that it was their duty to protect the city. Lord Luo met with Xing Wei at this time to discuss the fact that there was someone behind the dead rider. Teacher Lee thought it was worth ending the battle as quickly as possible, and the man took that role. The city head wanted the mentor to protect the students, but Xing Yue didn't want to leave the Lord alone. The blonde summoned her strongest familiar, and kite flames began to appear all around. Once Teacher Lee saddled the spirit pet, she ordered the students to be careful while she helped in the battle. Thus, Fengju along with Yeling stayed behind, while the strongest spiritual protectors went to the dead rider. Lord Luo rushed on top of the magnificent lion, scattering the low-level monsters to the sides with ease. When the head of the Black Rock City was close enough, he jumped up, about to attack the rider. The man planned to take the foul thing back to hell, but the skeleton easily stopped the man's blow. One of the red spirits appeared behind the Lord, and the dead rider reveled in its power. Fortunately, Teacher Lee and her kite of raging fire were nearby and could protect the Lord. The bird attacked the spirits with fire, allowing the head of the city to stay focused on the main battle. However, the dead rider was still terribly pleased with something and broke into loud laughter. At this moment, another portal appeared in the sky, from which an iron hand appeared. She was rapidly approaching the place where Yeling was riding Aju hovering in the air. The divine phoenix received a strong blow from above and began to fall to the ground. However, the red bird student was trapped in the iron fist and could not free himself. Lord Lo turned around at the young lad's scream, and realized that they had done what the dead rider wanted them to do. Xing Yue watched in despair as the uncleanness kidnapped Yeling and couldn't do anything to help. Ordinary citizens didn't understand why someone so powerful had captured a student. Meanwhile, Shui Yu was rushing forward with all her might, pushing off the ground and soaring into the air. The gray-eyed zombie saw only a master in front of her who needed the help of her familiars. Yeling watched his spirit pets grow distant and tried to return them to the familiar seal. He succeeded, and the iron fist disappeared into the portal along with a plume of fire and blood. Lord Lo watched as the portal closed and realized that there was no way they could help the apprentice. Teacher Lee was watching the disappearing Yeling from his kite at this time, and anger enveloped her mind. The dead rider once again broke out into a smug laugh and called the humans insignificant bugs. Xing Yue felt devastated and a pang of guilt, for she had failed to protect the student she trusted. But rage quickly overshadowed those emotions, and she tore towards the rider to kill him once and for all. Teacher Lee was deep in her thoughts for the first few seconds after the tragedy. But when she came to her senses, her rage carried her straight to the rider, and she was determined to take his life. The skeleton was not frightened by Xing Yue's threat, after all. He was enjoying the woman's suffering, and his laughter made it clear. The spiritual defenders rushed to the attack, wanting to subdue the shameless wretch's merriment. Lord Lo ran forward, and the magnificent lion leaped after, deafening his foe with his roar. Teacher Lee jumped off the kite of raging fire straight at the rider, and her familiar kept close by. They attacked the dead rider at the same time, leaving him no chance to dodge their blows. The skeleton fell to the ground, half of his armor shattered, but he still continued to laugh weakly. Fire flared in his chest and eye with renewed vigor as he shouted that the pathetic bugs would never win. The dead rider promised that people could only dream of it when Lord Luo realized they were in danger. The man warned Xing Yue, and they managed to dodge the explosion, but there were many black spirits flying above them. The spiritual protectors watched as the bloody whip spread everywhere and attacked people. Even the monsters standing nearby covered their ears in horror as the spirits swept past. There were those less fortunate, and the remnants of the dead rider's soul drove them into an even greater frenzy. Zhao Xiaoyu was still away from her familiar when one of the black spirits appeared as if out of nowhere. The student fearfully covered herself with her hands as the monster's fangs were right in front of her face. Suddenly, a beam of fire flew into the monster in front of Ziyu, and the girl was slightly thrown backwards. Right after that, Teacher Lee appeared in front of her and informed her that they would first destroy the remaining monsters before talking about Yeling. Meanwhile, the transient and Aju found themselves in the midst of a large, dark, unknown place. The brunette felt the presence of someone else behind his back, but when he turned around, there was no one else there. This infuriated the student, and he shouted to be spoken to since he deigned to be dragged to this strange place. His shout worked as King Lich appeared in front of him and began laughing at his emotional guest. Beast also noticed that such bravery explained how Yeling was able to make a contract with the sacred bird. The Eye of Truth revealed that in front of the brunette was Li Wei, who had reached the 3rd level of the 8th stage, and the fact that he was stronger than Li Xingwei caused fear. The Lich King wanted to know exactly how the lad had tamed the phoenix, for such a strong familiar had not appeared in the alliance before. Transient reminded him that he was only a 2nd stage spirit conqueror, while he thought about having to use the phoenix blood. Li Wei replied that despite his small level, the young man should realize the majesty of Aju. The monster threw off his hood, and Yeling could clearly see Wei's disfigured facial features. The student tried to find out what Mr. Leech had dragged him into the obscure space for. The monster created a sphere above its head and then dropped it to the floor, and a ruined city appeared beneath their feet. Among the ruins, Yeling saw many monsters, among which was the leader of the whip group. Turns out the Lich King wanted the Phoenix Wielder to join them to overthrow the hypocritical alliance. Besides, Li Wei had promised to grant the brunette terrifying strength, but the student didn't believe in beautiful but empty stories. Ye Ling realized that the space was under the control of the undead and wanted to get out as soon as possible. Mr. Lich threatened him with using his undead rot spell, but the brunette had already pulled out the phoenix blood. After assessing all the risks, the apprentice realized he couldn't do it without Trump, so he broke the summoning device. Li Wei didn't notice anything suspicious and continued to broadcast that he would destroy the ignorant child if she disobeyed. Things weren't going well in the human dimension either, because the monsters were catching the more inexperienced soldiers. But since the main threat had already been dealt with, Teacher Li could devote herself to commanding and organizing the defense. Xing Yue ordered everyone to summon their familiars and block the attacks of the fiendish monsters. Zhao Xieyu was worried about their friend, and Teacher Li had to admit that the guy could only rely on himself. After all, no one even knew where to look for the young man. Therefore, Seiyu looked into the portal and asked Ye Ling to definitely survive. The brunette unknowingly wasn't about to let his friend down, and just at that moment the phoenix blood came into action. The Lich King no longer saw the young man and his familiar in front of him. Instead, there was a bright glow in front of him. After that, the fire began to spread throughout the space, causing the monster to retreat, though it didn't realize what was happening. The Lich King squinted in an attempt to discern what lay behind the bright glow. And soon, the silhouette of a ninth-step divine bird appeared in front of him, and its strength was hard to comprehend. Feng Ju was affected by the phoenix blood, and now Li Wei was just a gnat to her, not a strong opponent. Suddenly, something changed in the space under his control, and the Lich King felt a powerful aura. A bright light appeared where the student used to stand with his young phoenix, and afterwards everything around shook and sparked with flashes of fire, causing Mr. Lich to become confused. Li Wei covered his face and stared into the bright flash, hoping to see what was happening, and he soon succeeded. In front of the monster stood a huge ninth-stage divine bird. Behind the strongest surname stood Ye Ling with his head proudly raised and asked if the foul beast would stand like this. Li Wei didn't understand how the young man knew his name or how he managed to summon a ninth-step spirit at the second step. The foulness came as he lost control of the situation, but the student wasn't about to waste time with idle talk. The ninth-stage phoenix sprang into action and allowed the Lich King to bathe in the flames scorching the heavens. Li Wei used a defense technique, hoping to stay alive, and quickly muttered an incantation. A statue appeared behind the lord that was able to hide him from the alley of death clouds. Seeing King Lich trying to fight, Ye Ling decided to show him the full power of the sacred phoenix. The brunette ordered the familiar to destroy the enemy, and the bird's flames began to fill the entire space. No matter how Li Wei defended himself, it was useless against the ninth-step phoenix sacred fire. The fire was burning through every inch of the Lich King's body, and he couldn't do anything about it. The monster was slowly dying, and the last thing he saw in front of him was the flame of the sacred phoenix. When the fire disappeared, the young man saw a sparkle in Li Wei's place and went over to take a closer look. Ye Ling picked up the Lich King's storage ring and wanted to see what the monster had stored inside. However, the phoenix beside him reminded him that the blood's effects were almost expired, which meant that he had to leave quickly. The student ordered the divine bird to use a burst of flame and burn through the undead space. Feng Ju obeyed and turned the place they were in into a handful of ashes in an instant. The floor beneath the brunette's feet began to thin and the student began to fall, finding himself back in the human world. Zhao Xieyu was watching the portal, so she was the first to notice something bright orange flying out from there. The girl ran up to Teacher Li and pointed at the falling object, and all the inhabitants of the Black Rock looked up. Xing Wei immediately realized that she was seeing her student, who was unconscious at first glance. Zhao didn't waste any time and summoned a fast wind dragon for the familiar to catch Ye Ling. The sky was still full of unclean things, so Teacher Li sent her flaming kite to protect the students. The spirit pet easily incinerated all the foul things in their path, allowing them to reach the ground without adventure. Zhao Xieyu gently placed the guy on the floor and began to examine him for injuries. Soon, a concerned Xing Yue was beside them, and the young man slowly began to come to his senses. The teacher admitted she was worried sick over the brunette's disappearance. However, the fact that Ye Ling wasn't even injured helped Mentor Li regain her joking mood. In addition, the students' return to Earth made the low-level monsters wake up from their madness and retreat. However, Lord Luo carried forward on his magnificent lion, attracting the attention of the Black Rock warriors. The man wasn't going to let the monsters go and ordered to chase them all down and destroy them. The city's army swept past them, so Xing Yue decided to remove the young man from the battlefield first. Teacher Li asked where Ye Ling was, and the student honestly answered that Necromancer Li Wei had transported him to the dark space. The mentor couldn't believe that the young man had managed to escape from an eighth-step monster, so the guy regretted his words for a second and didn't even know how best to justify himself. However, Teacher Li didn't seem to care. She began to rush back to the city to make a more thorough inspection. Soon, the situation in the city stabilized, and Xing Yue admitted that a cataclysmic organization was behind the attack. Ye Ling's classmates thought that their friend was damn lucky to be able to survive facing such a strong enemy. The brunette didn't argue with them, and the mentor reminded the girls that the student needed a rest. Besides, the others had to report back to the academy about the incident, so soon the transient was alone. The young man had waited a long time for this moment, so as soon as the door closed, he reached for the ring. The boy twirled the vault in his hands and wondered how many interesting things he would find in the necromancer's belongings. Inside was a lot of experience crystals, as well as dragon scales and a siren's eye. All these materials were needed for high-level ascension, and with the crystals, his familiars could easily make a breakthrough. At this time, the city of unholy things called Cataclysm finally learned of what had happened. One of Li Wei's subordinates appeared in front of the head and reported that his master's mission had failed. In addition, the monster was forced to admit that he had never been able to find the remains of the Lich King. The head jumped up from his throne, not understanding how this could have happened, and the subordinate mentioned the presence of a divine bird on the battlefield. For the first time in hundreds of years, the monster had lost the friend he had always warned not to provoke the phoenix. The subordinate hastened to report also that the black robe had brought a new young man to them. Liu Wu stood outside the large gate and listened to the monster warn him to be careful about speaking near the head. The door in front of them swung open, and a black robe introduced the son of the Liu family, the ruler of Tianhui City. The school bully was getting very excited and was actively looking around, the passage getting deeper and deeper into the main hall. The monster bowed to the head and reported that the man beside him had expressed a desire to join the Cataclysm. The beast looked into the boy's frightened eyes and recognized the former young master of the Liu family. The head amplified his aura as he welcomed the newest member of the organization, wanting to immediately demonstrate his power. Liu Wu kneeled down and began to actively thank the monster, promising that he would never let the new lord down. But, as expected, it was not so easy to join a secret organization against the government. The head directed the snake-like spirits towards the boy, and pronounced that everyone had to pay a certain price. The unknown creatures flew towards the shocked Liu Wu and flew straight into his chest. The young man screamed, and the overlord continued to say that as long as Liu kept his loyalty to them, everything would be fine. However, it costs a man to betray the organization of Cataclysm, and eternal torment awaits him. At this time, Ye Ling was still in his room in Black Rock City, and was looking at the necromancer's belongings. There were many useful things found in the storage ring, and one of them turned out to be a salvation ring. Its power was that once a month, upon receiving lethal damage, the wearer would be able to survive. Also present was a werewolf card that could be used once, giving the familiar a human guise. Ye Ling got excited and called out to Ah Ju to ask if she wanted to experience the map for herself. The bird was surprised when it heard that its master could turn it into a human and wanted to hear the details. The brunette showed Feng Ju the werewolf card, but the phoenix asked if she could take her true form. The student promised the divine bird that it could change its appearance at any time, and Ju was brimming with enthusiasm and wanted to try out the card as soon as possible and get the chance to become human. Ye Ling laughed happily and prepared to fulfill the spiritual pet's wish. The young man called out to the divine bird and asked if it wanted to turn into a human. Guy showed the spirit pet a werewolf card and told her that she could use it to take on human form. Phoenix wanted to know if she could take her true form and protect her master before making a decision. As soon as it became clear that Ju would be able to change his appearance whenever he wanted, the divine bird immediately agreed. Ye Ling rejoiced that he could fulfill Feng Ju's wish and allowed the system to transform the phoenix. The card in the brunette's hands glowed, its glow pointing towards the spirit pet. Streams of golden energy created something like an egg around the phoenix, and the card itself hovered in the air. Soon the unique object began to dissolve right in front of Ye Ling's eyes, and the light became even brighter. Ju's outline began to beckon more human, and the young man had to cover his eyes completely. Almost immediately afterward, the transformation was complete, and a rather pretty girl landed in front of the student. The brunette scrutinized the appearance of the familiar and realized it was different from what he had imagined. Once Feng Ju was on the floor and hurriedly asked her master if he liked her new look. The phoenix had long red hair, against which her green eyes stood out very nicely. The girl smiled happily as she posed in front of Ye Ling and thought that she had become even better than before, and all would be nothing. But the divine bird has completely forgotten that it is unusual for people to walk without clothes. After a short rest, Teacher LM's team returned to the Holy City by airship. Xing Yue realized that the mission had exhausted the students, so she let them take the day off and recover. The teacher was especially worried about Ye Ling, who had decided to go to Tianyu Pavilion first. On that note, all team members bid each other farewell and went about their business. The boy strolled leisurely through the city, thinking about the fact that his familiars had been well pumped up during his time at the academy. However, in the necromancer's storage ring, there were many things he could sell at a bargain price. Ye Ling met Lao Zhao at the entrance of the pavilion and informed him that they would need a bigger place this time. The manageress led them to a rather large room and suggested they leave their things in it. But the brunette was pretty sure he couldn't fit all the materials he'd brought for sale in it. Lao Zhao took the student to their largest hall and hoped there was enough room. Yeling took out his own storage ring and prepared to show the manageress what he had brought this time. Various items began to appear on the floor, and the girl recognized that the guy had brought quite a few things. But the curiosities continued to appear until the mountain reached the ceiling of the pavilion, proving that the student was the first guy in the academy for a reason. Manager Lao said she would need additional staff and some time to count and evaluate all the items. Ming Yao appeared next to Yeling, and upon seeing the amount of materials joked that those unaware might think that the brunette had robbed her pavilion. The young man said hello to Sister Shen and confided in her that he would never rob her store. The blonde asked the employee to hurry up and get someone to help because she needed to go to the auction herself. Yeling was interested in the event and asked Meng Yao to take him along to the event. The girl pointed a candy bar at the guy and asked him to give her at least one reason why she should do it. The brunette remembered that he had saved something special for the owner of the pavilion and took out a small glass bottle. It held the essence of fire dragon blood, something the young man had unknowingly told his older sister. Meng Yao wasn't prepared for such a valuable item in exchange for the auction and dropped the lollipop from her mouth. After which the girl quickly reached out her hands to Yeling and pulled the guy to her for a hug. It turns out that Miss Shen had been looking for exactly the essence of fire dragon blood for a long time. Lao Zhao looked up and saw the pavilion owner pressing the student's face right into her chest. The manageress was embarrassed but tried to pretend that she hadn't seen anything, and didn't even bother to listen to Meng Yao's explanation. Eventually, the blonde handed the assistant the bottle to authenticate the essence. After that, a joyful Miss Shen turned to Yeling and called him along with her to the auction. But other than that, she promised that she would owe him if he gave her the true essence of fire dragon blood. The young man decided to take advantage of his position and asked the girl to take him to see the spirit pet eggs. Meng Yao promised that she would be indebted to Yeling if he really did bring her a rare essence. And since the young man knew he wasn't lying, he immediately asked him to take him to see the familiar's eggs. For Miss Shen, this request was not a problem, as the pavilion's assortment had about 10,000 eggs. The blonde led the student to a large room with a huge number of racks on which eggs were displayed. Information could be seen next to each piece, and the owner of the pavilion gave Yeling a 40% discount on any egg. The brunette went in search of a suitable pet, but among the thousands of eggs he could not find the right one. There were quite a few rare specimens among them, but for some reason, none of them met the student's requirements. After a while, Lao Zhao appeared in the room, confirming that the vial contained the real essence. Meng Yao was overwhelmed with joyous emotions at the realization that her fire-winged dragon would finally be able to advance to the next stage. The brunette was about to ask the girl something about pet eggs when he was pulled in for another hug. Miss Shen was terribly grateful to her younger brother and completely forgot about the rules of propriety. Manager Zhao lightly coughed, and once again pretended that she didn't see anything strange. Yeling's embarrassment made the girl pull away and find out that the young man never found a suitable egg for himself. Meng Yao thought for a second and decided that they should go to the auction and try their luck. Such events often exhibited some pretty rare and generally good items. But Miss Shen still asked the young man not to get his hopes up too high because the prices at the auction were too high. Yeling indeed had limited savings, so he heeded his sister's advice and followed her to the VIP box. It was 20 minutes before the auction started, and Meng Yao asked the manageress what items would be featured in the auction. Lao Zhao reported that she had heard about a very rare egg with no details, which many people should want to acquire. However, other than the fact that the pet in it was unusually rare, there was no further information. The owner of the pavilion promised that soon he would be able to see the egg for himself and assess its characteristics. Over light conversation, the couple spent the remainder of the wait, and finally the hostess appeared on stage. The girl's name was Lin Lun, and she cheerfully greeted the guests, declaring the auction open. She hurried over to the first exhibit and pulled down the red cloth, revealing its view to the audience. A scarlet blood flower that not only increased the pet's fire resistance, but also pumped up its fire abilities. Lin Lun quickly reminded the guests of the features of the lot and announced the starting price of 1 million government points. The system showed general information about the flower, and it was clear that it was an expendable item. Yeling thought that Meng Yao was telling the truth about the prices since the flower alone cost 1 million. At this time, there was an active bidding in the hall, and the price of the consumable was already reaching 11 million. A student asked his sister why people fight over consumables, and Miss Shen that sometimes people raise the price just to mess up. Lin Lun congratulated the first winner and prepared the audience for the larger exhibit. The girl removed the red screen and a mystical spirit pet egg appeared before the audience. The presenter reported that the egg did not pass an objective evaluation, and it did not have a counterpart in the state database. Its starting price was 3 million, but onlookers were in no hurry to fight over an item that could have turned out to be trash. The lot looked good though, and its shell was something like white jade, While the audience was discussing the likelihood of wasting 3 million, Yeling shouted out the starting price. The young man was willing to give a rather large amount of government points for the unique spirit pet egg. People in the audience didn't understand how they could put that kind of money on an obscure item. And the fact that the first bid was made from the pavilion's VIP box led them to believe that the owners were trying to drum up excitement. Thus, no one present even fought over the spirit pet egg. The unique egg went to Yeling, and Miss Shen couldn't understand why the guy chose obscurity among other rare specimens. The brunette thanked his older sister for her concern and lied that he loved the feeling of buying the unknown. Though really the guy was using the Eye of Truth and knew exactly what kind of pet was inside. Yeling used the Eye of Truth to find out who was hiding behind the shell of the spirit pet egg. Although the student got what he wanted, he stayed to look at the rest of the lots. Lin Lun introduced the Pearl of the Ice Sea to the guests. The exhibit was extremely beautiful, but it was also endowed with a powerful ability to summon 8th and 5th level magical beasts. And at least 20 million had to be paid for the ability to summon ice beasts. The system showed Yeling more detailed information. Besides summoning, the pearl allowed him to avoid some mental attacks. Miss Shen noted the beauty of the lot, but the younger brother said it was too garish and impractical. Nevertheless, the bidders argued fiercely for her, and the bid reached 35 million. Suddenly, someone's voice came from the back rows offering to give 70 million for the pearl. Yeling and Meng Yao watched the new guest who had wasted a huge amount of money. Miss Shen assumed that Sun Hao, who was an ordinary spoiled young master, had come. The girl didn't want to date that man, so she offered to leave the event before it was over. The brunette didn't argue, but it was too late, and Sun Hao had already gone up to the VIP box. The man held the ice sea pearl in his hands and said that he had acquired it for Meng Yao. The young master boasted that his gift to Miss Shen was worth as much as 70 million points. The son of the Sun family was distracted by the blonde when he saw an unfamiliar guy next to her and demanded to know what their relationship was. Yeling had no intention of doing so, which caused Sun Hao to anger, who immediately approached the brunette. The young master felt that he had the right to threaten the student simply for standing next to Meng Yao. The pavilion owner tried to pull her younger brother away and convince him to ignore Sun's son. But Yeling noticed that the kid had been boring the blonde for a long time and asked him to trust him on this matter. After that, right in front of Sun Hao, the student pulled Miss Shen to him and kissed her. The spoiled young master screamed with rage and ordered his underlings to kill the insolent man. The bodyguards of the Sun family's son drew their weapons and began to approach Yeling. Hao's subordinates had high levels, but Meng Yao wasn't about to let a fight break out on her family's territory. The most sensible bodyguard had to admit that they shouldn't start the proceedings in the pavilion. The spoiled young man threw away the pearl of the icy sea and promised they'd get even. Yeling didn't even flinch and continued to cradle Miss Shen as the misunderstood admirer left the pavilion. Sun Hao wanted to find out all the information about the person who dared to steal his lover from him. Although in reality the son of the Sun family didn't really care who he was, so Hao ordered to kill the insolent man anyway. The students were alone again, and the transient promised that the guy would stop bothering Meng Yao. Instead of gratitude, however, he received an irritated shout demanding that he remove his hands. The girl looked nervous and confused and was trying to figure out what to do since Yeling had stolen her first kiss. Miss Shen still hadn't decided how she was going to get out of this situation, so she gave in to her emotions and ran away. The brunette gave Meng Yao a glance and thought that he couldn't have imagined that the blonde would turn out to be so shy. Immediately after the auction ended, the student went to the dormitory to get a new contract as soon as possible. He summoned Shui Yu and Aju to witness the birth of their new friend, although the phoenix was not very happy about it. Transitioner placed his hand on the spirit pet's egg and it glowed under his palm. But instead of fire, a soft golden glow walked through the room at the same time as strong currents of wind. And Ju was carefully watching the arrival of the owner's new favorite when suddenly cracks appeared on the egg. A few more seconds passed and a small fluffy lump appeared in front of Yeling. The little three-tailed fox spirit had an innate charm and was immune to mental attacks. The brunette reached out to the small, furry animal and said hello to his new familiar. The three-tailed fox was acting cautious, so Yeling confidingly said that he just wanted to pet it. The spirit fox jumped onto its master's shoulder, causing Feng Ju, who thought that it was only her place, to shout angrily. The girl was unhappy that they had an addition, and clearly wasn't prepared for having to give up her place on Yeling's shoulder. The three-tailed fox hid fearfully behind the young man's shoulder, and the boy reminded the phoenix that she was human now. The divine bird was having a very hard time with the arrival of a new surname, and blamed the brunette for forgetting about the old ones. The young man didn't know how to calm the irritated Aju, so he informed his new pet that they were quite noisy. Yeling tried to distract the phoenix and suggested that everyone should think of a name for the new spirit. The redhead was still unhappy and offered to name the fox Wang Cai, but the student dismissed that option. The Redbird Academy student began to think for himself and noted that their new friend was white in color. This led him to think that the fox's name Bai Lin would suit him, and the little beast showed that it was pleased with its master's choice. and Ju didn't want to start getting along with Xiaobai, so she hurriedly left for her room. Yeling logged in and began to look at the new pet's profile, realizing that it was worth getting to work on pumping it up. Meanwhile, Meng Yao met with her father, who was pleased with the way his daughter had dealt with the Sun family's scum. Except that after listening to the girl's story, Fei Yun was impressed by some of Yeling's younger brother's qualities. And when he mentioned this to the blonde, he noticed the student blush. Meng Yao tried to hide her embarrassment and pretended not to understand what her father was saying. Suddenly, Fei Yun had a hunch and excitedly asked if his daughter had fallen in love. Naturally, Miss Shen denied everything and hurriedly hid in her room, mentally scolding Yeling for embarrassing her. But Chief Sheng had enough of the blonde's reaction to know that it was better to get to know the new student if the opportunity arose. A full week had passed since then, and life at the academy was quietly going on. Zhao Xiaoyu was walking across the campus when her gaze came across the younger brother, Ye. They exchanged greetings, and the girl noticed that her friend's combat power had increased greatly. Except it turned out that the brunette had found the top spot in the sophomore class rankings for a reason. The student wanted to challenge a female classmate, and the other female students didn't miss the chance to watch their duel. The students around were wondering if the second-year head would agree, though everyone recognized that she was very strong. The young man suggested not to set a separate time and start the battle right now to see who was stronger. Zhao Xiaoyu weighed all the factors and agreed, admitting that she was curious about how far Brother Ye had come. The head of the sophomore class prepared for a serious fight and summoned her two familiars. A storm dragon, already familiar to the brunette, appeared next to her, as well as a new pet diamond gorilla. The students' confrontation was very exciting, and everyone was curious to see how it would end. The guy decided to start fighting using the gray-eyed zombie, so he summoned only her to the battlefield. The students of the academy had already seen Shuayu, but her beauty still won their hearts, making them doubt her reality. Zhao Xiaoyu was angered that Yeling didn't use the phoenix and felt that she was being underestimated. However, the brunette hurriedly calmed down his classmate and gestured for her to start the fight. The first-ranked sophomore prepared for battle and ordered the spirit pets to attack their opponents. The diamond gorilla took the first step, and its huge fists flew towards Yeling. The student jumped back at the last moment, and the monkey left a huge pothole on the ground. The brunette stopped beside Shuayu and noticed that the storm dragon was also about to attack. Zhao Xiaoyu shouted at the storm dragon to not hold back and show itself in all its glory. The familiar didn't want to disappoint its mistress, so it attacked Shuayu with slashing gusts of wind. The zombie girl dodged with ease, and Yeling allowed the gray-eyed girl to try out her new skill. The spirit pet applied a death stare, and a haze enveloped her gray eyes. Shuayu hovered in the air and waited for the diamond gorilla to fly close enough to her. The zombie easily dodged the attack, inflicting several serious scratches on the familiar at once. This was the first time Zhao Xiaoyu had seen something like this, and was greatly surprised at how her gorilla had slowed down. Meanwhile, the zombie girl grabbed her opponent's arm and prepared to make a throw. Xiaoyu threw the diamond gorilla straight into the ground with such an elegant look as if it wasn't several times smaller. Xiaoyu threw the diamond gorilla straight into the ground with such an elegant look as if it wasn't several times smaller. Xiaoyu threw the diamond gorilla straight into the ground with such an elegant look as if it wasn't several times smaller. Xiaoyu threw the diamond gorilla straight into the ground with such an elegant look as if it wasn't several times smaller. Xiaoyu threw the diamond gorilla straight into the ground with such an elegant look as if it wasn't several times smaller.